Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the astrology of July 2025. Hope that you are having a wonderful afternoon out there. We're going to be doing a deep dive of the lunations in July, the new, the full, the quarter moons. We're going to talk about ingresses of planets into new signs. We've got a big one this month with Uranus changing signs. We're going to talk about solar phases, planets stationing retrograde, merging from under the beams, going under the beams. We got a Cazimi of Mercury this month. We're going to talk about it all. We've got a Jupiter malefic enclosure. Well, we're gonna break it all down. So if you are joining me here today, please let me know here in the chat. Thank you so much for your support. It's always nice seeing all of these friendly faces here in the chat. My good friend Rachel Fletcher is here. What's up, Rachel? Says hello from Roanoke, Virginia. And we've got a little bird, Loki. I think that's Loki in the chat there. Her little beautiful, I believe it's a budgie, a parrot, some kind of beautiful bird. So welcome, Rachel. Nice to see you here. Ani is here. Hello, Ani says hello. Glad I can make it today. Having coffee and doing some yard work. Oh, Ani, that's what I need to do. I've got so much yard work to do, but one day at a time, right? We've got to pace ourselves, and hopefully we can, help to contextualize what's going on in the sky while we keep our feet and hands in the dirt. I think that's a good way to keep balanced with all of the things that are going on in the world right now. So thank you for joining me here today, friend. Okay, couple announcements before we dive into the astrology of July 2025. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the work that I do, welcome. This is a channel where we do astrology each week generally, and break down the major transits that are going on around us. But if you want more of a personal reading, where I take time and do a number of pages of notes on your chart and spend some time and witness your journey, you can find me over at spencermichaud.com. Click on the Book Now button. I'd be happy to work with you, help you with any challenges that you may be going through, help witness and validate your journey, and I don't know, just to share some time and space with you. So hopefully you can join me over at spencermichaud.com. I do natal readings, I do transit readings, I teach classes. I've got a wonderful webinar coming up with my beautiful partner, Tanya Andrews. As I'm recording this tomorrow, Saturday, June the 14th. So I hope that you'll join me for that. We've got the Dignity and Devotion Jupiter webinar, where we are going to be breaking down the Greater Benefic, all of its significations, mythology. We're going to be talking about it in its own dignity and its stability, how to work with that. We're going to talk about crafting a ritual and a magical practice around that. We'll talk about elections, which is a way to pick the right type of chart for the right type of event or the right type of magical working. And Tanya is really doing great work with these webinars. I'm so blessed to be partnering with her in life and in these webinar series. You can also find Tanya over at Third Coast Mojo. If you need any help with your magical workings in the world, she ritually crafts these beautiful, beautiful oils, soaps, salts, all of these things that you can kind of capture the essence of a planet and maybe help you work through some of the challenges that planet might represent within your life. Here we see the exalted moon in Taurus oil, beautiful stuff. I wear it almost every day. It really helps you feel grounded and secure as much as you can in an ever-changing universe. But yeah, really great work. And I think it pairs really well with Venus in Taurus as we are recording this. If you would like a 10% discount on any of the readings that I offer, you can subscribe to my newsletter in the description of this video or podcast, or over at my website, spencermichaud.com. A great way to stay up to date on what we're doing with classes, with live streams, any kind of offering, Third Coast Mojo updates, all of those things can be found at the Spencer Michaud Astrology newsletter. So I hope that you will join me there as well. And finally, if you want to support the channel today, you can purchase a super chat while I am live on YouTube with a little $ in the chat, or you can go over to buymeacoffee.com and support the channel that way. That's a great way to help me keep the lights on. All of the subscription services that we have to purchase, like StreamYard and things like that, they get more expensive by the day. So I appreciate all the help helping me continue to do this work. So thank you so much for those of you who have been able to contribute. All right, friends. So we are going to talk about our big picture thoughts. Before I do that, I'm just going to welcome a couple more friends here. Ani says, coffee talk, let's wrap. Yeah, coffee talk, like Saturday Night Live, right? With Mike Myers. Coffee talk. It's fun. Tom Hines is here. Namaste, Spencer, and everyone. Welcome, Tom. Hope you're doing well over there in the west coast of the United States. Ani says, by the way, loving the Jupiter and Leo oils. Thanks, Tanya. Ooh, she will be happy to hear that. I'm so excited that you are enjoying that. She does really, really great work. So I'm so blessed to be kind of the guinea pig for the magical oils. And I layer them. I layer them on every day, but really great work. And thank you so much for supporting her and her work there as well. Tarya is here. Hello, Tarya. Says, hi, Spencer and all others. Drank too much coffee and staying up late. Well, moi, Tarya. And I hope that you're, I hope that we'll be the I don't know, your bedtime story today, Tarya. Don't feel bad if the dulcet tones of my voice put you to sleep. We'll get you over to dreamland today, but thinking about some of the astrology along the way. I love all my international friends stopping in too. It's so beautiful to be able to cross, boundaries that we craft that are somewhat arbitrary, oceanic boundaries, nationalistic boundaries, all of those things that we craft as this ideal, and being able to transverse between those is a really beautiful thing. I've been listening to a lot of Anthony Bourdain recently, who I found is sort of a chart twin of mine on some level. He is a Leo ascendant, Cancer sun, and Venus in Gemini, which I share all of those placements with him. And I just enjoy the idea of connecting over a meal. And I feel like we're trying to do that here on some level. I wish we could break bread together. We sort of do when we take our snacks, but we're sort of connecting over the shared astrology, and just that type of thing is just really beautiful, marvelous, and something I think we need in these times that can be very divisive. So I'm going to welcome just a couple more friends here. Benel Dell, what's up? Laura, nice to see you. Hello from Ohio, which is interesting. Laura just went through a move from Wisconsin to Ohio. So I'm glad that you're getting settled in over there, friend, and hope everything's going well your way. Rachel says, Anthony Bourdain, didn't know he was a fellow Venus in Gemini. Yeah, his work is amazing. I started listening to his book, A Cook's Tour, and watching the series that was of the same name. I've watched No Reservations and some of the other stuff that he's done, but just his ability to connect with people in a way that was so egalitarian, and his ability to discover new cultures and things of that nature through the love of food was speaking my Cancer Taurus moon language. It's great. Oh man. So let's talk some astrology here. Let's break some metaphorical bread together. Get yourself a snack, get yourself a tea. I've got my matcha green tea. I watched an episode of A Cook's Tour in Japan, and they had a matcha tea ceremony, and that was really cool to witness. But get your favorite drink, get your favorite snack, and let's tuck in for a little bit of a couple hours of astrology. So big picture thoughts for July. I'm doing the Astrology of July a little bit early this month because I'm going to try to take some time off at the end of this month of June as I'm recording this, and I think a much needed, it's kind of reset, kind of break. Sun's gonna be moving through my 12th house. I need a little time out, and so thank you for bearing with us as we do this a little bit earlier, where some of the events that are unfolding, we might not have all of the context that we normally would if we were to do this closer to the thing, but I think that that's an opportunity for us to really dive into the meat of it and to the metaphorical symbolism that we're going to be exploring. Robin is stopping in. What's up, Robin? Hi, Spencer and crew. Robin from Healdsburg, California. I'm looking forward to finding out what July would bring. I love Anthony Bourdain. We've got so many fans. He's, like I said, huge fan right here. And just everything about what he represented, I think is, iconic, Ani says. Absolutely. Okay. So big picture thoughts. First thing, the biggest kind of thing we're going to be seeing in July is Uranus moving into a new sign, into Gemini, out of Taurus. It's been in Taurus for roughly 7 years or so, and it's going to be moving into a new sign, Gemini, and that brings with it some opportunities for change. I've been reading. I've been just kind of diving into, and I'm just in the beginning of my Uranus and Gemini kind of research and understanding. But I've been diving into this book, The Art of Stealing Fire, Uranus and the Horoscope, by one of my favorite astrologers, mythopoetic astrologers, psychological astrologers, Liz Green. I do have a foundation in traditional astrology, but Liz Green, I'll tell you, just through her understanding of myth and of archetype, echoes a lot of the traditional astrology ideals. Kind of the way that those things all are put together. She's tapping into something, some kind of zeitgeist, and she has a lot of really interesting thoughts, and we'll try to unpack that a little bit as we go forward too. Uranus and Gemini. Uranus, I think, is a planet that it's an outer planet, so it's a transcendental planet, you could say, on some level. It means it has collective impact, maybe even more so than individual impact, although we are individuals that are part of a collective. But I think that we have these myths that are Promethean in their context. The very smart astrologer Richard. I was trying to say Robert, but Richard Tarnas talks about Uranus in relationship to the Promethean myth, the Titan that stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity, and the human impulse to be like the gods. And we'll talk about that, and also maybe some of the hubris involved in that as well. I think that sometimes as we try to chase divine ideals, we sometimes lose track of the individuals that can suffer from collateral damage from being so far committed to an ideal that we don't think about the ethical repercussions and the real life repercussions of it. And with Uranus moving into Gemini, I think a lot of those things are going to come through technology, communications, the way that we're going to split our consciousness off into a myriad of distractions that's already happening. But we'll break that more down as we get to it. It's going to move into Gemini on my birthday, July the 7th. So mark that on your calendar. Let's celebrate Uranus moving into Gemini together. We're also going to see both a Mercury and a Saturn retrograde this month in July. We have Mercury moving into its retrograde phase in Leo. Saturn's going to station retrograde in the very beginnings of Aries, and then move back into Pisces in the months ahead briefly, which could be kind of maybe a little bit nice respite from some of the biggest challenges of Saturn in Aries. It's also going to unlock Jupiter for a short period of time from the overcoming square that Saturn is providing. So if you're doing Jupiter elections, oftentimes people will try to capture the essence of a planet when it's in its exaltation, and Jupiter being in Cancer is in a really dignified spot. You got a window. You got a window between the beginning of September and roughly mid to late November, where Saturn isn't going to be in the challenging position, the overcoming square, like blocking off some of the good that Jupiter can do. So we'll talk about those retrogrades in more detail. We also have Jupiter, the aforementioned greater benefic that we're going to be discussing tomorrow in our Dignity and Devotion webinar. We are also seeing Jupiter moving through what's called a malefic enclosure. And a malefic enclosure is when both Saturn and Mars, the two quote-unquote malefic planets in astrology, are casting either a ray on either side of the planet or are hemming it in on either side of its bodily conjunction. And that can feel like a really difficult time in our experience of that planet or what it represents and an area of our chart. I would say that the best way to deal with malefic enclosures is patience. I think oftentimes when we find ourselves between a rock and a hard place, we kind of have to wait it out a little bit. And I think a lot of the impulses that we're going to be feeling with Jupiter in Cancer, and I've talked about this on the channel a number of weeks in a row, sort of the liberatory influences that we might feel from Jupiter, based on Zeus's role as the liberator of his siblings from the clutches of Kronos, or the bowels of Kronos. We may be feeling those liberatory instincts very strongly because Jupiter is exalted, but we may have to work within some really challenging circumstances until later in the summer. And I think that that's true whenever we're trying to make change within the world. Sometimes we have to work within the system that is already made for us, and a lot of the things that we are working to change, they begin behind the scenes, and they're not always very visible. So this malefic enclosure could test our faith. It could test our ability to organize around wanting to make change, wanting to do good in the world. But I think patience is the best way to deal with that. We also are going to be experiencing in July a square from Venus to Mars. So these two traditional planets squaring off to one another. It's going to be towards, I would think, towards the end of the month. And also a Sun-Pluto opposition. So we'll break that down. That one's probably we're going to feel that probably pretty intensely. The Sun-Pluto opposition from Leo to Aquarius. And definitely power struggles coming up with those two aspects, two difficult aspects potentially. We are going to kind of look at our medium range view now. We have a number of lunations. We have four lunations that I want to make you aware of. I tend to look at things through the eightfold lunation phase, but I think it's good to mark out at least the new, the full, and the quarter moons. So on July 2nd, we have a first quarter moon at 11 degrees of Libra, squaring the 11-degree Cancer sun. That is a decan of Libra that is associated with oaths and contracts and your word. So we may have some challenges with some legal challenges that may come up around that period of time. It's also very close to a fixed star called Vendomiatrix, which is called the Widowmaker. So we may have to deal with some losses potentially, or deal with gathering information. Ampelos was the youth that Dionysus was mourning after he was called the grape gatherer. He climbed a large grapevine and fell from a great height, and Dionysus was mourning his loss. So we may be trying to gather some information as well. That could be another interpretation of Vendomiatrix. We have a full moon on July the 10th at 18 degrees of Capricorn. So we have the sun in Cancer, Cancer 2, trying to bring us together in a protected space, I guess, in a safe space. And the moon in the second decan of Capricorn, which is often associated with building great structures, but also has the danger of hubris. And the moon is not in its favored position in that as that full moon. So trying to balance out our comfort, our domestic lives with our professional lives, our ability to be soft with our, but also working within circumstances that may be a little more difficult, a little harder. So we'll break that down in depth. We have the last quarter moon on the 17th of July at 25 degrees of Aries. So maybe trying to let go of something that is Aries in nature, letting go of maybe some individual desires to help work with whoever we consider kin, right? And with Jupiter in Cancer, hopefully that expands our idea of what our family is, maybe just expanding it from our own biological family to our neighborhoods, our people that we live in the same city, the same country, the same world, right? Expanding all of those possibilities. And sometimes we have to release some of our individual desires to create that harmony. And it's a worthy sacrifice, in my opinion. On the 24th, we have a new moon at 2 degrees of Leo, and that's very close to that opposition with Pluto. So we'll break that down. We might be trying to figure out the challenges of visibility, especially when it comes to a society that is making visibility only okay for some and not for others. So we'll have to figure out how to work through that and see if we can contextualize it through the language of astrology. We have a number of ingresses in July. We have Venus moving into Gemini on July the 4th. We have Uranus, that's the big one of the month, moving into Gemini also on July 7th. Happy birthday to your local friendly astrologer here. And then the sun is going to move into its own domicile of Leo on the 22nd. And then finally, at the very end of the month, on the 30th, Venus is going to move into Cancer. So those are our 4 planetary ingresses. Again, The Uranus one is the big one. That's one that doesn't happen very often. That's only every 7 years or so. So we're going to potentially feel a shift in our consciousness around that. Solar phases for the month of July. And what I'm going to do here, friends, if you're new, we kind of take a big picture, thoughts about what's going on, and then we kind of zoom in to this like kind of medium level, give you some dates to work with. If this is for everyone of varying attention spans, if you're like, just give me the general idea, tune in for the first 10, 15 minutes, you know. But if you want to stick around, we kind of go through in detail most of the non-lunar, the major lunar aspects, but most of the non-lunar aspects for the month, that we talk about it through the language of the decans and the tarot and things of that nature. So we kind of zoom in great detail as we go along. So solar phases for the month. On July 4th, Neptune is going to station retrograde at 2 degrees of Aries. So maybe a lot of the delusions when we come under collectively, we may start to question some of those things. Maybe some of those things will be backtracked. And also, this is very interesting because Saturn is going to be stationing retrograde on the 13th, which is not too far after that. So if we lose some of the impetus or some of the dream, right, of kind of this radical independence with Neptune and Saturn moving through Aries, you know, maybe that changes some of the way we're structuring society with Saturn stationing retrograde as well. On the 15th of July, Jupiter is going to emerge from under the beams as the morning star at 8 degrees of Cancer. So this is really important for planets, especially from a traditional astrology perspective. When a planet emerges, it's sort of an omen that is speaking louder than it normally might. And with Jupiter emerging, I think that those liberatory kind of impulses we might start to see the vision of how that could come together. Again, Jupiter's still going to be under that malefic enclosure, so we might not be able to act on some of those impulses until the beginning of August. But I think that if we look at this in the big picture, you know, Jupiter's going to exit that malefic enclosure in August. And then we have that Pluto out of bounds that our good friend Painted Turtle, Lauren, was starting to get us hip to. And I got a really great book from Lauren too, a recommendation, which is called, I believe it's Persephone's Revolution, which is about Pluto out of bounds. Really interesting stuff, and we'll talk about that as we go along. So the gist of that, if you're curious, so I don't leave you hanging too much, is when Pluto goes out of bounds in the northern declination, we tend to see tyrannical governments start to take power and some really challenging experiences. When it goes out of bounds in the southern declination, which it's going to do on and off for the next 10 years, starting in September, we see these revolutionary impulses that sometimes redistribute power to the people. So if you've been wondering what's going to happen on a larger term scale, maybe that's hopeful, you know. We are also going to experience a Mercury retrograde in July. So Mercury is going to station retrograde on July the 18th at 15 degrees of Leo, right in the second decan of Leo, which has some associations with pursuit of our own authenticity, of feeling acknowledgement for who we really are on the inside. And we may be asking some questions about what is our authentic self? What is our expression when everything around us is changing? Who are we when the roles that we played and crafted identity with don't exist anymore, right? Or are changing very rapidly or require change. Mercury is going to go under the sun's beams a few days later on the 22nd, the same day that the sun ingresses into Leo at 14 degrees of Leo. And then finally, at the end of the month, we have a Mercury cazimi, a retrograde inferior conjunction with the sun at 9 degrees of Leo. So maybe a new start, a new idea of who we are and how we show up in life. It's going to station direct on August 11th at 4 degrees of Leo and emerge as the evening star on that date. So we'll talk about that cycle in greater depth. Oh, let's see. D is stopping in. What's up, D? Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well over there across the pond. Stephen, the Jupiterian, is here as well. Hope you're doing well. Stephen out there on the west coast of the United States. We have out of bounds planets this month also. We have 2 moon phases out of bounds. We have the moon going out of bounds from July the 6th to July 11th. And we also have the moon out of bounds from July 19th to July 24th. So not a ton of out of bounds planets. And in June, we're experiencing, as I'm recording this, we're still experiencing a Mercury out of bounds phase. But in July, just the normal moon out of bounds. It's not anything super crazy with that. The other thing I will say, though, we talked a little bit about that Jupiter malefic enclosure. And that's going to be active from June 26th all the way until August the 1st. It ends with a Venus-Saturn square. I'll show you all that in detail. I'll try to teach as I go, teach the details, teach the techniques. But that malefic enclosure is going to end at the beginning of August. So Jupiter, we may have some challenges getting our momentum going with Jupiter in Cancer. Again, I think it requires patience. I think that it requires that we dig deep for our hope, and that we try to have faith in the process. And Jupiter is a great planet to try to cultivate faith with. All right. So those are sort of the medium range views. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start contextualizing this within the decans. So what we're going to start with is the Sun in Cancer 2, the second decan of Cancer. And what I'll do is I'm going to bring up my Decans of Cancer webinar that you can purchase at the store if you'd like to support the work that I'm doing and you want to go even more in depth into these themes. So let's bring that up. And here you can see one of the slides from the second decan of Cancer. And we are looking at the Three of Cups Tarot Association. The book T, which is a book that is related to the Golden Dawn, if you were curious, and the Book of Thoth, which is a kind of a competing interpretation from Aleister Crowley, call this decan the Lord of Abundance. I have some familiarity with this territory. This is the decan that my natal sun is in. Again, my birthday is July 7th. And my experience of this decan, which Austin Coppock calls a walled garden. And we start with this because this is going to be a big spotlight that where all of us are going to kind of be working through some of these conscious issues potentially. This is the canvas that a lot of these other aspects are painted on. It can really give us a conscious awareness of what the Olympian gods may be asking of us during these periods of time. So the Lord of Abundance, right? This is a peak period of abundance in summertime. It is a place that is related to creating a safe space so that something can be nurtured to its fullest potential. Remember, we've talked a lot about Gemini as the need to make a choice, the need to work through all of our different options, but to finally maybe sacrifice some of those options to decide which of the things is most important to us that we can nurture to full fruition. And here we see the three graces here, these muses of nature. And there's a spirit in this decan called Heracles or Hercules, right? And Hercules was tested by his mother Hera, right? Heracles basically means the glory of Hera. And she was very angry at Zeus for yet again stepping out of their marriage to beget another child out of their wedlock, and kind of tested and punished Hercules. But through those labors, crafted a humility and a wisdom through him. So in Cancer 2, many of the natives that have placements in this, and we may be going through this too, we get tested through some of our early family experiences. Now, I can attest to this. Like I was tested by my family quite a bit early on in life. I had a lot of kind of disruptions in my early life. And, you know, I love my mother, and may she rest in peace at this point, but she definitely tested me as a young person because she had some of her own challenges. She was kind of in and out of my life at various points when I was very young. So, but that made me stronger. It made me the person that I am. It also gave me some things to overcome, some labors to overcome as a not only as a child, but as an adult. But I think that's one thing to think about with this decan is it can be a test coming from the family. It also can represent celebrations, rejoicing, and mirth. And you could see that in the Three of Cups here. This is a Mercury-ruled decan, so a lot of communicating strong emotions, strong feelings are part of this decan. Themes, we can go down the list here. Maternal enclosures, safe spaces. Bina and Bria, which is the Kabbalistic tree of life, emotional containers. Bria is the, or Bina, excuse me, is the Saturn decan, or Saturn Sephira, excuse me, mixing up the language here. So Bina creates structure with our emotions, and that walled garden is the structure that helps contain some of our feelings, that helps contain some of our nurturing and our love, so that we can protect it from the outside world. Much of this is something that I've had a lot of movement in towards my life, trying to be either a protective influence or even just protect myself from the world on some level because of my extreme sensitivity. So we can sometimes it's hard to function in the world when you're very sensitive. And Austin compares this decan to and people who work with this decan to hothouse flowers. You need a very specific environment to flourish, and sometimes if you take it outside of that environment, it can be really difficult. Themes of being forged in the family fire, being tested by your family of origin, being tested by your community, being tested by your kin, whatever that means to you. I would say another thing that's interesting about Cancer too is the quest for immortality. And this is something I don't think we hear quite often enough with Cancer. And some of that has to do with some of the fixed stars in this decan, especially related to Sirius, which is at about 14 to 15 degrees of Cancer. This is where my sun is at. My sun's at 15 Cancer. So this feeling, I understand. It is the desire to create something divine. And Liz Green, that we've been talking about, that we will talk about more, has a wonderful book, The Astrology of Fate. She talks about Cancer being associated with Achilles, the Greek war hero. And he, of course, was dipped into a river by his mother, I believe Thetis or Themis, like Thetis. I think it's Themis, but I sometimes I get those two confused. But she was a goddess, and she was his mother, and she was trying to protect him because she knew of basically a prophecy about his potential perishing. It's a prophecy that was saying like he could live a long life but of little renown, or he could live a very short life and be eternal, right? Remembered eternally. Part of the story goes is that she only dipped him up to his ankle, so he had that quote-unquote Achilles heel. Now this is interesting because sometimes what we experience with Cancerian energy is the desire to protect something that will stand the test of time. And I can say this as an artist, and for those of you Cancer types out there, you probably relate to this. I think there's a secret perfectionism in Cancer that we don't necessarily talk about. We often talk about perfectionism in signs like Virgo. Sometimes we talk about it in the air signs. But I think there's a secret perfectionism in Cancer that feels that everything that comes out of them has to be a reflection of timelessness. This is another reason you see Cancer having sort of a nostalgia associated with it. I don't think it's necessarily just nostalgia. I think it is a desire to connect with something timeless. And I can speak with experience from this week after we had lost two greats in the music community. We lost Sly Stone, aka Sylvester Stewart of Sly and the Family Stone, earlier in the week, and then yesterday or the day before, we lost Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. And Brian Wilson, also a Cancer Jupiter native, he had, I think, a lot of demons associated with his perfectionism of trying to create something timeless, the burden of his own genius, right? He created something so great in the album Pet Sounds that trying to create the follow-up literally drove him mad for almost 4 decades. He did finally complete that, and there is a video on YouTube that shows a live performance that he did in his, I believe in his 60s in 2013. It's incredible. It's really, really amazing. But yeah, this drive towards immortality, this drive towards expressing sentiment, drive towards expressing care, vulnerability. This was something that I loved about Brian Wilson, is that he didn't just have musical genius, but he was expressing his almost childlike vulnerability in a time when people had extreme facades, even people in his own band. Think about another guy in the band, Mike Love, who always seems like he's doing like the finger guns, and, you know, and he often would clash with Brian Wilson because he was like, hey, you're messing with the formula, the mask that we put on of everything is fun in the sun and fun, fun, fun until your daddy takes the T-bird away. And, you know, and Brian Wilson was trying to express something deeper, some more of his, again, sensitivity and vulnerability. So these are issues that we might see coming up in the Cancer experience as well. I do think this can be a time of abundance. In the Northern Hemisphere, this is a time where we start to really be able to begin to harvest some of the things that we've planted during spring. Like, this is where we start to have more food on the table. It's a time where oftentimes we can experience the good life, sometimes a life of ease. If you look at the opposite decan in the Northern Hemisphere, Capricorn 2, that's in the middle of winter. I mean, the landscape is much harsher. It's colder. There's not as much food growing. You have to be maybe more resilient or tougher to survive during that period of time. Here, again, there are survival challenges in any time of year, but I think here there might be more resources available potentially, hence the Lord of Abundance. Let's see. D says, perfectionism, especially in a self-judgy way. That's fair. D says, as a Cancer rising. Yeah, again, I think it's a different type of perfectionism. I think with Virgo, it's more about the physical flaws that are trying to be eliminated and identified to be able to preserve things against the ravages of time. In Cancer, I think it's hard to verbalize, to be honest with you, but I think there is a desire to return to the womb, and that womb maybe being that undifferentiated awareness that we all experience before coming into this world, maybe as part of the world soul, I guess you could say. And sometimes when that doesn't match with the vision we have of an ideal, people can get really disappointed or try to aspire towards something. The other thing I will say about Cancer is you have to be very careful not to project that desire for timelessness, that desire for eternity, for divine perfection onto a child or onto a creative project. You know, Themis, I believe, if I'm saying it incorrectly, I believe Thetis is the goddess of rivers. I think Themis was Achilles' mother. It's very close. I think that she was projecting her divinity onto a child who had his own destiny. And I've been guilty of this in the past too. I tell this story sometimes, D, of becoming sort of a swim dad. And my daughter expressed an interest in swimming after a really difficult time in her life, and I thought it would be a really great way for her to exercise and have some structure and discipline and learn something that would build her self-esteem. And I think that I got a little carried away with that in her high school years, and eventually had to realize that, you know, it wasn't, I was saying in my mind, I was like, it's not good enough just to do all of those things. I had these grandiose visions of, well, let's go to the Olympics. Sometimes you look yourself in the mirror and say, well, whose dream is that? Is it really their dream? And if it was their dream, then that's one thing. But if it's kind of a stage mom or stage dad dream, that's when you have to have a reality check around it. And this is something that we can experience too in this, not only this decan, but all the decans of Cancer. Jennifer is here. What's up, Jennifer? Nice to see you. July 21st birthday, Jennifer says. Gemini rising. All right. Well, there you go. Happy birthday, Jennifer. We're going to be celebrating a birthday in the same month, friend. Jennifer says daughter is a Cancer rising and Cancer moon. Well, maybe you could see some of these themes playing out in her life as well, Jennifer. So questions you can ask yourself when the sun is moving through Cancer 2 from July 1st to July 11th. What in your life is worth protecting? You know, we've talked about what is worth pursuing, what is worth nurturing in our Gemini discussions. When we talk about this in Cancer, what is worth protecting? What do we want to nurture? What do we want to bring to full fruition? We can't necessarily do it with everything. And we have limited resources sometimes. We have limited emotional resources sometimes to protect something and nurture something to fruition. I'm experiencing this in my garden right now. I have 40 plant starts, you know, that I only have space for probably half of them. And I have to figure out, well, which one of these is, do I want to nurture in my own garden? And then what do I do with the rest? You know, give them away to neighbors. Figure out ways to not let it go to waste. Maybe someone else can share in the burden or the joy of nurturing. You know, so this is, you can look at it both ways. And maybe that's a way to share the abundance that you create. Again, sometimes in Cancer, we have a time of year where we have more abundance than we can know what to do with. And that's probably not going to change with Jupiter in Cancer, although we will see some limitations from the overcoming square with Saturn. Second question we can meditate on: how can you create a safe space to promote healthy growth? And that means different things to different people. For some people, that is a physical space where they can be in their own energy, be in their emotional space. I know as a 12th house sun, I really enjoy my solitude. And sometimes because I'm so sensitive to other people's energy, I need time away from being social so that I can understand and hear the voice of my own soul rather than all of the emotional cues that I witness in people when I'm in their physical space. I was talking with my partner Tanya about this and meditating on this, and she's like, much of that is a trauma response. You know, many people who have Cancerian placements had to develop sensitivity because the people around them were unpredictable and sometimes unsafe. So a lot of the Cancerian origin story comes from really having to be forced into developing a sensitivity to the adults in your life or the people in your life. Because if you didn't, you became the victim of their unpredictability. And this was true in my life too. I had to tune into my different environments in a very sensitive way. And sometimes because my parents didn't always communicate what was bothering them. And you had to read facial cues. You had to read body language. Many times when we have placements in Cancer, we become almost expert body language readers. It's not necessarily what someone is saying, the words that they're saying. It's how they say it. It's did their eye twitch when they say it? Did the corner of their mouth rise or fall? All of those little details. That can be both a blessing and a curse, because sometimes we can make the mistake of reading into something that isn't necessarily true. And then we can craft an entire imaginative narrative about what someone is really meaning behind what they're actually saying. And we have to be very careful of that moving forward. I've made a lot of mistakes doing that as well. It actually helped get me out of a lot of jams, and it did warn me to some danger, but that danger can become exaggerated, and it can start transforming into paranoia if you're not careful. And this is interesting because the United States is a Cancer sun. And I think a lot of the issues that we deal with in the United States have to do with that, reading into things, feeling this very self-protective energy, this energy of isolationism sometimes, where we feel like we have to get rid of anything that might disturb the idealized vision of what God deemed this country to be, or the role that they are supposed to play. And I say that sarcastically, because I don't think that this is God's chosen country. I actually really rail against that. I think that all people and countries are divine and are here for a reason. So I think that this is an interesting meditation when it comes with seeing some of the psychology and events that are playing out, not only in our own lives, but in the collective, especially here in America. How can you best appreciate this moment and share your abundance? Gratitude is a really important concept. And I think that as I grow older, I really realize that it is one of the fundamental ways of existing in this world peacefully. Just appreciating something. You know, if you start to appreciate something, you will get more of that which you appreciate. I'm learning this with my neighbors too. It has been a long journey to start to realize that we can be active agents in creating the type of peaceful experience with others that we so crave and desire, even when they are different or when they are doing some things that are sort of annoying. Here's a small example. I have a neighbor who likes powerful vehicles, and sometimes they will make a lot of noise. Sometimes they will peel out and spray gravel all over the place. And initially, you know, you can have a negative reaction to that. But instead of approaching those neighbors with aggression, I have learned, like approaching a dog that you don't really know very well. You know, you approach them with kindness, but with also with sternness. You know, with an ability to be both kind but strong, and you just have a conversation, and you don't necessarily have to be aggressive. That can spook somebody, right? And I'm having a much better experience as a Cancer who is very sometimes territorial by just really trying to create win-win situations and understanding and trying to understand someone else's perspective, coming at them with kindness and with trying to find win-win situations. And I think that when the sun's in Cancer too, we can, I think, trying to attempt that. And as citizens of a country that also has the sun in this decan, how do we start to see, you know, our neighbors, all of our neighbors, even the ones that we don't necessarily agree with, either politically or culturally, that we still see the divine spark within them and appreciate that diversity that, you know, that we share, that makes that what truly makes a community. We have to find those win-win situations, in my opinion. Okay. What familial challenge has shaped your character? We've talked about that a little bit with Heracles, and you might be going through one of those experiences when the sun's moving through Cancer. Are you owning your divinity, or you're projecting it onto others? Again, reflection of the Achilles myth. And then finally, what connects you with timelessness, or with the timeless? This is something that, again, I've really had an aspiration towards. And one of the things that I also am starting to learn as I move forward on my journey, I don't think that you can, I don't know if you can consciously capture something timeless. I think you can understand some of the qualities that go into something that might appeal to people across time and generation. But I think that one of the things I was learning, especially in regards to art, is a great artist is a mirror that is holding up a reflection to their community in the time and culture and with the materials and knowledge that they have in that moment. And if you are reflecting the human experience, or the experience of life, it doesn't even just have to be the human experience. It could be a reflection of nature. That will become timeless because of your authenticity, right? It's not about chasing a specific, like mimicking a specific artist that has become timeless. They became timeless because they were chasing an authentic expression of their lived experience in that moment. And that's a really different way of looking at things. And so that might be something to consider while the sun is moving through Cancer too, is how can you be in the moment and reflect that moment powerfully and authentically. All right, Let's keep going. Jennifer says, I'm the Cancer that holds the family together. Very hard at times. Yeah, Jennifer, I hear that. And I think that that's a role that we often play or attempt to play. For not only our own family, but sometimes for our friends, for our communities. I do it. I do it on this channel all the time. I'm doing it right now. But I would also say that we sometimes need to allow ourselves to be helped and to give of that love and that holding together energy unconditionally. I think sometimes the other, kind of criticism of Cancer is that because the crab is not necessarily a direct mover, it moves sideways, it moves backwards, it moves forwards. Sometimes Cancer, because of their ability to tune in to like the subtleties, can be accused of subtly trying to manipulate the feelings of others. Remember that Cancer is a cardinal sign. And oftentimes when we're not acting consciously, when we're acting out of a fear that we're going to lose something in our life, right? That we're going to lose something. We may be subtly trying to pull strings that some people might not want to be pulled. So it's a very tough balance to like quote unquote keep the family together, on a personal level, but also on a collective level, without becoming something that we don't want to become, right? All right. So let's start breaking it down. What do you say? So we're going to zoom in a little bit here. We've got our Cancer 2 reflection. And I'm speaking from experience of like learning that as much as we want to create an emotional container, not only for ourselves, but for others, other people have their own free will. And we have to really examine our motivations within that. Are we doing this for our own comfort? Or are we doing it for the collective good? And those lines can get really blurry really quickly. And it takes some really reflective, even dark nights of the soul type of experience. And sometimes the other part of that is if we are trying to, quote unquote, keep the family together all the time, sometimes what we're doing is we are robbing our family or the people that we're trying to teach or protect. We're robbing them of agency and independence. This is one lesson that I learned from kind of going on the Brian Wilson deep dive this week after his death. His father, a Cancer son, but with Saturn and Leo, was their manager, but also very controlling in Brian Wilson's early career, and created a lot of the trauma that I think Brian was dealing with throughout of his life. It wasn't all bad. He was a champion of their music early on, but at the same time, some of that got very out of control, and he had some abusive qualities as well. So there are two sides to every single sign, right? Yeah, Jennifer says a tidal wave, like a wave coming in, going out, all about timing too. Yeah, I think that we go through different timings as Cancerians, different moods. Especially track your mood with the moon. Track your moon with the full moons, the new moons. Sometimes our energy levels will be very visible at full moons, but at new moons we might be wanting to retreat, or balsamic moons wanting to retreat. Okay, so the first kind of little thing that we've got going on here is we start off the month with a first quarter moon. So this is going on July the 2nd. And let's just kind of get the lay of the land here. We've got, so as I was speaking towards a little bit earlier, this is happening around 11 degrees of Libra. And you've got the sun here in Cancer too. You've got a moon in Libra. And also just pointing out that here's Jupiter in the malefic enclosure. And I told you I would explain this a little bit, but here's Saturn casting its square array at 1 degree of Aries to 1 degree of Cancer. Mars is casting its ray from 8 degrees of Virgo to 8 degrees of Cancer via a sextile. Now, the reason why we had the start of the malefic enclosure in the end of June is because the sun, when it moved past, okay, the sextile with Mars, was no longer able to break it up. So when the sun moves past the sextile ray of Mars, it's no longer able to intervene. So then this condition, no other planets are going to be breaking this up until August 1st. Okay, so something to consider at the beginning of the month. But this first quarter moon, first quarter moons generally are about trying to bring something into existence, right? And this is coming off of a new moon that we experienced on, or will experience as I'm recording this, on June the 25th at 4 degrees of Cancer, which is also coming off of a Jupiter cazimi at those similar degrees. So this might be the point where we're starting to say, okay, we've planted a seed for a new sense of what it means to be a family, what it means to be kin, what it means to protect those that we love. And now we have to think about the other perspective. One of the challenges of Cancer energy is we can be very protective, but that also can make for hard shells, right? It can make for, like in America, for example, this is like where people are building walls to keep others out because they want to quote unquote protect the people that they have on the inside, right? And that in itself, this wall construction, these building of excessive boundaries can hurt people. So we have to think about the other perspective when we get to a Libra first quarter. As like, when we're trying to protect something, what are we casting into exile? What suffering are we creating by trying to protect something that is sacred to us? Now again, this is on a fixed star, Vindamatrix, which is a difficult fixed star. Sometimes you see people who have Vindamatrix placements, they will lose a partner, sometimes through death, sometimes through just separation. This can also just be about oaths, contracts, whether we're committing to them or whether people are breaking them. Maybe you're trying to create a new contract around your family expectations. That's one example of this. Like, let's say that you are, there's always conversations that we have within families and domestic situations. And oftentimes those agreements are assumed. It's assumed that this family does this at this time and these are the rules, etc. Well, sometimes the structures and rules that you create and the agreements that you have with family members, they're appropriate for one phase of life. Imagine the rules that you have for a toddler versus the rules that you have for a teenager or your relationship as an adult to that child. They have to change. They have to be different. Like the core of your love is not changing, but the way that you initiate it, the way that you cultivate it has to be a little bit different. So this might be sort of a little bit of a renegotiation of some of our agreements and oaths and contracts that we have, especially within our families and within what we consider our communities and our kin, etc. That brings us to July the 4th, which is kind of a big day in the astrology of July. So I'll move the chart forward a little bit here. So here we have Venus conjoining Uranus. Okay, it's happening before it transits into Gemini. So I'm going to move this back just a little bit, a few hours, and give you kind of the timeline here. So here is the conjunction with Uranus. And then shortly after that conjunction, at about 29 degrees, it will transit into Gemini. Neptune will also station retrograde on this day. So we may have a realization about what we desire, what we love, and it may be a kind of a lightning bolt of awareness. We'll talk about this when we get to Uranus and Gemini, but one of the great ways that Liz Green has been talking about Uranus and the Art of Stealing Fire, which I think is a fairly new book, she talks about it as Chokmah. And Chokmah is a sephira in the Kabbalistic tree of life that's like a flash of awareness, which feels very Uranian. It's this spark of the divine, of divine awareness. Robert Schmidt talked about Uranus as maybe potentially a transcendental sun, where we have this awareness of a divine ideal that we're aspiring towards. And people would consider Uranus revolutionary, but I think that, and that is not untrue, but I would offer that maybe the revolutionary instincts and impulses that we feel around Uranus are because of an idealistic vision of humanity trying to aspire towards something more divine, more godlike, more perfect. And when they start to realize that their reality doesn't match that divine ideal, that Platonic ideal, that's when people get upset. And that's when people start trying to overthrow whatever system they see that is in the way of that divine ideal. Now, that can be sometimes a good thing, and that can sometimes be a very bad thing. You know, it's hard to judge one way or the other. There are people that have very warped divine ideals, right? That they think that they're doing something in the name of God, the divine, etc. But really what they're doing is very selfish and very destructive. So I think that Uranus can be utilized as a liberatory force, but it also can be a very destructive force. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we get to Uranus in Gemini, but think about Venus conjoining Uranus and the things that are associated with Venus, what we love, what we desire, how we bring harmony together. The third decan of Taurus, where these two are coming together before both planets move into Gemini, is associated decanically with hubris in the face of nature, okay, with overcoming a natural disaster, of patience, of repenting from doing something rashly and having to go back and repair and fix something. So this may be something where you have a flash of awareness and insight in how to repair something that you love, or that you're trying to bring harmony together with. Maybe it's something that you're trying to, maybe you get a nice, to me, this is like the insurance check comes in the mail after the tornado destroyed your roof or your garage or something. Saying, oh, well, and you didn't expect it to come so soon or something like that. You know, it's like, it's something that helps, that may be unexpected, but it's something that's trying to remedy maybe something that has fallen into corruption or into disrepair or something of that nature, whether through your own actions or just through the natural forces. So that's something to keep in mind. That can really free you up and give you a lot of options as we're starting to move with those planets into Gemini. So Venus moves into Gemini shortly after that conjunction, like an hour after that conjunction. And it's going to start opening up our minds to new possibilities, maybe even too many possibilities. We've gone through this with Jupiter and Gemini, where it's expanded our possibilities to an unsustainable point. And with Venus there, we may just be really feeling more social. We might be feeling like we want to explore a little bit more. We want to visit more flowers in the garden, like a bee that is collecting pollen. I guess that when Venus first moves into Gemini, one of the things you can feel is a little bit of that paralysis by analysis, like too many options. I don't know what to do. I feel stuck. It's also going to start initiating the square between Venus and Mars, where your desires to expand options, right, and to like visit more things, Mars in Virgo says, hey, it's time to cut down some of these options and say, how are you going to make this real? So there's competing influences. And I'm going to tell you, friends, I have Venus in Gemini and Mars in Virgo. I live this. So the way that I deal with this square with Venus and Gemini, we'll talk about this as we move forward to that square a little bit more. Is it's like breathing. I breathe in a lot of information. I have a very large library of books, more books than I can probably read in this lifetime. I like it that way because I want to have the possibility of like, oh, I could discover something new tomorrow. I love that energy. And there's something to be said, like you can get that energy at a library, but like it was true. I got that energy at the library. I have a little bit of the, Taurus moon, sort of Jupiter on the fixed star Thuban, dragon hoarding tendencies. I admit it. Like just with books, mostly with books. But I think that Venus in Gemini wants to explore. And the way that I see my process is I'm exploring multiple sources. I want to get as many viewpoints as possible. But then Mars in Virgo says, all right, which of these sources is going to help you craft something that can be digested and that can be learned and can be taught? And in that process, you have to make a lot of cuts. You have to make a lot of hard decisions. So I think that you breathe in information, you exhale out that which is not specific to your purpose. For example, I often, every time I do these monthlies, I do 3 to 4 pages of very, very detailed notes. Part of that is the Gemini Venus process of being able to kind of just see all the possibilities. And then I read over it many times and I start to see what is most important. Okay. And how often do I actually look at these notes during the broadcast? Not a lot, because I've already done the work of making it an instinct. So that Venus Mars square is taking information in, processing it, really understanding it. This is some of the criticisms people have when we talk about Gemini, is that, yeah, you're exploring things, but are you really integrating it? Are you really understanding it? Are you really making it something useful? And I think that this Venus-Mars square is going to help us to really ask some of those questions. Now, Neptune retrograde on the same day, I mean, this is not as uncommon. It is not super uncommon. These outer planets do station retrograde. Most of them, I think, once in a yearly cycle. So I think that this might be just the vision, the dream, the desire to transcend through this radical individualism. I think a lot of questions might be asked around that. Like, is this really the way forward? And as someone who believes in collective good and working with other people and aspire towards that, at least, I think that asking those questions is a good thing. And especially Saturn's going to be stationing retrograde here as well. So I think it's going to backtrack some of the social construction towards radical independence. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily bad. But as someone who is aspiring towards learning more about Taoist wisdom and Taoist philosophy, I think it's good to maybe not necessarily judge things as good or bad right away, right? We can try to protect people from suffering, but sometimes we tend to see things without context. And you go back to that yin and yang symbol where you see the overflow of light creating a seed of dark, and it flowing into one another constantly in this endless stream back and forth. And in the darkness, there's a seed of the light that's being born. So I think if you can hold on to that ambiguity through Neptune phases like this and ask the right questions, I think that can help move through this with grace. So I move through to the 6th of July, and here we are experiencing one thing I would say just about July 4th. So Venus is conjoined Uranus. At least it's not Mars conjoining Uranus. I have seen some Mars-Uranus squares or something like that around the 4th of July, and like that's when you blow your hand off with like a firework. You know what I mean? That's bad news. Now with Venus Uranus, maybe there's some unexpected beauty that comes around. Like maybe there's something beautiful that arises out of that. I as much as I am, I don't know what the word is right now, dubious of the history of how this country came to be, I have had a few beautiful moments appreciating just like a fireworks display on July the 4th. I had one experience in particular. I went up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and we were up in Marquette, Michigan, and they have these big, huge, they're like, what are they? They're like ore boats. They're like these old like ore ships on the dock, and they were firing off fireworks off of the dock on a vacation that I was on a few years ago. And you could see the fireworks display, and it was all reflected in Lake Superior. It was just a really magical experience. Like it was something that I hadn't, seeing a fireworks display over a body of water can be really beautiful. Now, we can be awed by the beauty of something like that without necessarily even agreeing with the symbolism behind it. We can be critical of the symbolism behind it. I think we're allowed to do that in the Constitution of the United States. Is we're allowed to be critical of our government. That's one of the fundamental rights that I think that we hopefully are trying to protect. Is that to me is what freedom of speech means. But I digress. So Venus Saturn sextile with Saturn and Neptune, maybe just another moment where we're being real, trying to be charged with being realistic about our dreams. Maybe we're asking a lot of questions about our individuality, about what it means to be truly independent and what it means to be empowered as an individual versus the needs of the collective. Some of those might be fruitful conversations on the 6th of July. Let me get to one of the really important days as we start building towards the full moon in Capricorn. Okay, all of these are in context of a lunar cycle, and we're building here. So here's July 7th. Happy birthday to me, future me. Maybe 45 this year. 45 years old. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, it feels like it's breezed by. But I'm grateful for those years, and hopefully there will be many more to come. So here we have Uranus moving into Gemini. Really big transit for the year. Okay, so here we go. And kind of joining Venus. We also have that Venus trining Pluto. Okay. So we've got Uranus changing signs, Venus trining Pluto. Now we've kind of started previewing Uranus and Gemini. So let's kind of unpack it a little bit now. I know we've got a question here. Jennifer says, with Venus Uranus conjunct, how might it show up with that conjunction square a natal Uranus and Leo? Well, let me think about that real quick, Jennifer. You're trying to get me off track here with your Gemini questions, but no, I love it. I think very briefly, I think that can feel a tension between your desire to defend your authenticity with a need to fix something that may have fallen into disrepair, either through no fault of your own, through like a natural event or some kind of humility in the face of nature, or through maybe something that you may have done too rashly and too quickly, and now you have to go back and redo it, or something of that nature. And with Uranus squaring that, if it's in the third decan of Leo, you may have a lot of flashes of awareness of it, or insight about how to defend your own personal authenticity. So I hope that that's helpful for you. And yeah, I mean, Uranus squares, those are challenging, right? I was reading about the different Uranus transits over the course of a life. And we have a Uranus square, the second Uranus square. First Uranus square is when we're in college or when we're in our early 20s. Second Uranus square, early 60s or so. And a lot of times people are retiring, or life is changing, or they have different roles within their families or their parents are they have more responsibility with that. So trying to figure out what your role is while you're trying to remedy something that has requires your practical attention, I think could be how you're dealing with that. Okay, so let's talk Uranus and Gemini a little bit more here, specifically Gemini, right? So we've talked about Prometheus. If you're not familiar with the story of Prometheus, we have a Titan, which is important, not an Olympian god, a Titan in Greek mythology. And Titans were children of Gaia, children of the earth. This was one thing that I loved that Liz Green was pointing out. As a child of Gaia, they are earthy. You know, these are beings that are trying to manifest some kind of divine ideal, but in an earthly fashion. And Prometheus stole a spark of fire from Zeus, hid it in a fennel stalk, gave it to humanity as a gift. And Zeus wasn't very happy about this. Zeus was like, now that they're going to have a little bit of my power, and I'm not going to have as much power or dominion over this human race. And he punished Prometheus for doing that. He chained him up to a rock or to a mountain, and basically asked him to repent and say, hey, I did wrong. This is something that we don't often hear about this story. You know, Prometheus Bound is a really great examination. But Prometheus, like, screw you. I believe in what I did, and I'm not repenting. So Zeus sends an eagle, and in some stories a vulture, to consume his liver that he regenerates every day. So he has to suffer for this gift that he gave. So a couple things we can glean from that, right? We can glean an ability to create, we can glean that sometimes we have a flash of awareness and insight. But sometimes we can suffer for that, and that can create isolation and repeated suffering from that. Like, imagine that you have an awareness of something that might happen in the future, and many of you probably do as you're studying astrology. Because Prometheus translates to foresight. Imagine you can see the writing on the wall with something, and that in turn can make you feel isolated from your community because of that awareness. I often experience this. I can see certain aspects and things coming, and I try to tell people, but some people believe me, some people don't. Most of you here, bless all of your beautiful souls, you know, tend to keep coming back and like hopefully you'll be able to utilize this information within your life effectively. But a lot of, you know, for most of my life, having this skill sometimes was, you know, not something that people either appreciated or even took any advice. And that can feel isolating and things of that nature, and make you feel separate sometimes. It doesn't necessarily make you feel better or worse. It's just there's just isolation through it. So I think that part of it is important. Again, I'll reiterate that the ability to aspire towards a divine ideal, when pursued at all costs, at costs of like human suffering, we have to start asking ourselves if that is the essence of hubris. And hubris is thinking that we are a god. And I do believe that we have a spark of the divine in every human being. I don't necessarily feel like we should always play God or feel like we have to chase this divine perfection or evolution or whatever you want to call it, progression, at the expense of human, animal, plant, earth, life. One other story that Liz Green talks about in The Art of Stealing Fire is Frankenstein and Mary Shelley, who had the Sun conjoined Uranus. And she talks about the warning that Frankenstein expresses of a person, Dr. I believe Victor Frankenstein, who was trying to cheat death by reanimating a being out of different pieces of people that had died. And eventually that turned into something monstrous in that story. And I think that this is something to really think about, because oftentimes as human beings, we are like, well, let's rush out and see if we can do something new and grand and whatever. Artificial intelligence, as an example. There's so many corporate interests right now that are just rushing to just create whatever, whenever. They're not thinking about the actual repercussions. They're thinking about, will I be able to profit quicker than my competition? And eventually that might lead to some things that will create human suffering perpetually. You know, I'm thinking about the artists that are having their work pillaged right now by artificial intelligence, and the homogenization and mediocreization of the things that it's pumping out. Eventually, if you keep drawing on the same sources over and over and over again, it starts pumping out the lowest common denominator, and it's crazy. I would also say we're getting to a point with technology, because of Uranus moving into Gemini, the way that we communicate, the way that we see each other's humanity. We are at the point now with this technology where it's starting to become difficult to ascertain what our eyes, ears, and senses are telling us through things like video. I've seen some very disturbing videos recently where, if you had showed me this, I would have, beyond just a little bit of a feeling, like an intuition that something's off about it. It's very close to not being able to tell. And that is a scary thought, because how the people that control this technology right now, not all of them are ethical people. And what happens when we have people who are in control of a technology that makes us question our reality? And you can see this, this manipulation of media, etc., already in the collective. Now, I hesitate to go down this type of rabbit hole with this, because I think there is a balance between being skeptical of what we are seeing and what we hear, and descending into conspiracy theorist paranoia. It's a very fine line. And if we can believe in nothing, can we believe in anything? And these are some of the questions I think Uranus and Gemini are going to start bringing up, is how do we communicate with one another? What is real? Should we be pursuing these new avenues of communication, these new avenues of, I don't know, splitting our attention in 1,000 different directions? One of the things that happened when Uranus was in Gemini previously was the suburbanization of our communities. One of the things that Gemini does is it splits things into smaller pieces. Like, imagine the ancient Greeks thought that, well, I don't know if they thought this literally, but they had a metaphor of Okeanos. And Okeanos was an ocean that surrounded the earth. And there is a goddess, Tethys, that is the goddess of rivers. And she's one of the spirits of Gemini 1, the first decan that Uranus is going to be traveling through. Okay, and I'm going to show you this. Because I think these themes are really important when we talk about it, specifically in respect to Gemini. So I'm going to pull this up. So here you can see, here is 8 of Swords, Gemini 1. And we have this proliferation of options, this paralysis by analysis, splitting of attention, Tethys, right? The ocean splitting off into many different tributaries. And if we think about Hermes, the ruler of the host of Gemini, he moves very quickly. He moves between worlds. He moves between liminal spaces. He's a messenger, right? Think about that splitting off of the centralized community of like a city in the 40s, and creating these suburban spaces that in theory were supposed to bring about abundance, the ideal of every person having their own little yard and their own little house and their 2 kids and their dogs, or whatever that vision of the 40s and 50s quote unquote nuclear family. Isn't that ironic that is the word that we used in a time when we actually saw the proliferation of nuclear technology? I think that that experience it had its fallout. It had almost the opposite effect on some level of us feeling isolated. I've been in suburban America. I grew up in some areas like that. There's this, like, the dark side of it is like the Stepford Wives, right? Where just everyone's kind of like, pretending that they're happy when they're just very isolated and, just getting lost in their own individual hells. So I think that this is something else where our attention can be split in so many different directions with Uranus moving into Gemini, that our ideas of technology, of communication, of centralization could be really shaken up. Now, Gemini and Hermes is a planet, according to Schmidt, that likes to destabilize. It asks a lot of questions. And Uranus could be creating way more questions than answers during this period of time. Now, it also coincides with the United States Uranus in its natal chart, and has coincided with conflict, because Uranus is in the 7th house, the house of open enemies in traditional astrology. So it could also be reflective of conflict. I hope that we default into our higher and better selves, our peaceful selves. But the way things are going, it seems like there is definitely some challenges on the horizon, one way or the other. I guess as a collective, one thing I want you to meditate on, and maybe even put in the chat, maybe, help me out here. If we were to make, let's just operate under the premise that Uranus is a divine aspirational quality for a collective. What types of things are we aspiring towards in Gemini? What does Gemini uphold as divine, right? Those are things to think about. What is it? Is it the exchange, okay? The exchanges of information. Maybe it's the exploration. Maybe it's the open-ended non-committalness that we experience because we want to be able to have our options open to keep exploring indefinitely. But Gemini isn't a place that you can live at indefinitely. The pollination collection phase cannot be done indefinitely without the bee being weighed down and being unable to fly. Eventually you have to choose. Eventually you will have to make something of it rather than just be lost in the endless distraction of a new flower over the horizon. Yeah, Kai says ways to connect and to mirror. Absolutely. Merchants, finance, Ani says. Good. Love it. Yeah, we could see some innovations in the way that we exchange goods, in the way that we buy and sell things, changes in currency, potentially. Those are all things that are up for Uranian shocks, I do think that the AI part of it is probably going to be important. And we also see this reflected in the Pluto in Aquarius, these air signs, these exchanges of information, these outer planets, 2 outer planets in the air signs could feel like our realities are very fluid, very scattered, very hard to grasp, right? This isn't a super earthy time. This is a time where up is down, down is up. Well, oh, here's a new thing. It's just popping in and out of existence. That's what air can feel like, in Hermes especially. Let's see. Karen is here. What's up, Karen? Kia ora. Hello, Spencer, and everyone listening. Nice to see you, Karen. Hope you're doing well over there in New Zealand. Jennifer says, yes, I need to grow in my authenticity with a retirement coming up in a year. So maybe that's going to help. Yeah, You know, Uranus square oftentimes comes during retirement age, and we have to redefine ourselves on some level. D says, there's so much beautiful shiny tinfoil. We need our shiny hats. I hear you. And I totally understand some of the impulses towards skepticism, because when you've fallen victim to the abuse of control, gaslighting, things of that nature, it does make it hard to trust. And I think that, but again, I think that there's a difference between healthy skepticism and then descending into just everything is a lie or everything is not real. Like, I mean, that's where we get off into. That's not a recipe for happiness. I've seen some people like this online. Some astrologers have fallen into this that are in the astrological community, and every single damn thing is some kind of great conspiracy. Sometimes things are just what they appear to be. You know, sometimes there's not just this great machination behind it or some great power behind it trying to control it. Sometimes there is, but not all the time. And I think we have to be able to trust our intuition. We have to check in with each other. This is the other thing. This is the other thing that creates the difference between those kind of things. How do we check in with each other to say, hey, is this real or not? Because of the divisiveness of like different media sources and extremes on with different political ideologies, you know, sometimes what we do is we're falling into echo chambers, and on both sides of a political spectrum. And this is exacerbated by the algorithmic nature of the internet. So how do we check in with people and have real conversations with them and say, is this your lived experience? If you look outside right now, is this what you're living? Because sometimes this is something that I'm looking at with, for example, and as we're recording this in June, we have a lot of attention on Los Angeles. And there's a lot of ways that it's being portrayed as far as just everything is in chaos and on fire. And there's a little bit of that. But there's also people coming into that community and basically kidnapping people's neighbors and shipping them off without due process. There's also a large faction of people in Los Angeles that are like, this whole city is not on fire right now. This is an extreme exaggeration to create a distraction from some of the other power plays that are happening out in the world. 95% of this city or more is just going about their business. And you see, this is how we check in with people who are actually living that experience rather than just taking the power merchants' image crafting just as gospel, right? So you can ask those questions. But if you have someone who has like literally like boots on the ground there and they're telling you that this is my lived reality, that's when we have to start figuring out how do we accept some shared realities with people rather than everything having to be some lie or conspiracy. So I think this is going to be important with Uranus and Gemini too, because how do we communicate information with one another? So we've had these really great ideas. We had ways to connect and mirror, merchants and finance, dispersal, Ani says, bridging, Jennifer says, yes. How do we interpret things? Like one thing that could be cool with Uranus and Gemini, we could have some breakthroughs in language. The thing that was popping into my mind with Jennifer says bridging. Maybe we learn how to communicate with animals and plants in a way that we could completely not understand before. And maybe by doing so, we start to see life from a completely different lens. My partner, Tanya, has been reading about plants and how they communicate in their consciousness lately. And it's really amazing how I think mistaken we might be about their feelings, their consciousness, the way they communicate with each other. Same thing with animals too. For a long period of time, humanity has tried to just unensoul those creatures. Maybe with Uranus and Gemini, we start to communicate and they start telling us some things. Like imagine if a blue whale that's been alive for hundreds of years could start to communicate some of the truths of how they experience the world, some of the things that we could learn from those creatures. An octopus, who for all accounts is extremely intelligent, could teach us if we would just sit and humble ourselves for 1 second, instead of trying to always pursue this godlike domination of our environment. And just sit with that for a minute. That might be some of the greatest breakthroughs that we make, is humility. Yeah, yes, with that vibration, Jennifer says. I love it. Dee says, well, if you look at it in a Gnostic way, the Earth was here long before Yaldabaoth arrived. So it's not completely a bad world. I don't think it's a bad world. Yeah. And I agree. I think that this Earth is a mother. Gaia is an organism. And it's not a bad thing. I think that it's a good thing. If you look at it from an indigenous perspective, it's a loving, abundant, giving, reciprocal mother that wants to take care of us. Not something that, well, when we in Western civilization, we have not been reciprocating that love. We've been exploiting. So, and when I talk about like the environment and things like that, I've always been of the belief that the Earth is going to be fine because it's self-correcting. It has what's called homeostasis. And all the experiences that we're having with extreme weather patterns is the Earth self-correcting. The problem is that the Earth may be self-correcting humanity right off of the face of it if we don't learn how to work with it rather than to just continue to exploit it. So the question is, do you want humanity to survive? Not are we going to save the Earth, or is the Earth good or bad? It's like, do we as a species, do we get with the program and learn that we are part of this delicate balance of nature rather than continually try to exploit it for our own benefit? Maybe we figure out how we give back to it, to that mother. Maybe we should think about this in our own families. We just think about our own human experience. A lot of times when we're younger, we think about how our parents can help us. What can we get from our parents? What can they give us so we can survive? And it's understandable sometimes. As teenagers, we can be very self-centered. But eventually, as you mature, you're like, how can I give back to my parents in the way that they helped me? How can I help them? It's all circular. And if you start to look at the Earth as your mother, how can you take care of her, as she ages? How can you have a relationship with her that is reciprocal instead of just using her up until she's a husk, right? Or making her so angry that she just eliminates you from the face of the earth. Remember, mothers sometimes will say, I brought you into this world, I could take you out of it. that to me is what the Earth is saying right now. I brought you into this world and I'll take you out of it if you can't figure out how to work with me, right? I think that's pretty funny. But anyway, Gemini 1, proliferation of options, paralysis by analysis, splitting of attention, awareness of dualities. This could really shock us into an awareness of certain dualities that we didn't understand before. A lot of self-doubt. We'd be having a lot of interesting questions could be asked during Uranus and Gemini. What choices are before you? Are you thinking yourself into a state of frustration? This is the communal questions we could be asking. Do we need more information, or do we need to quiet the mind? I have a feeling with Uranus and Gemini, the noise is going to get to a crazy pace. And as reflective individuals, how do we quiet our own personal mind while the collective is getting noisy, 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 noisy? That doesn't mean we ignore the collective, because sometimes we are going to have responsibilities to take care of not only ourselves, but others and people who need our help. But how can you do that from a place of calm, centered clarity rather than from a place of constant distraction, terror, and fear? Okay. What do things look like from the opposite perspective? Maybe we get some, like I said, like being able to communicate with animals in a different way. Maybe we start to see the world from their perspective and their consciousness from a tree's perspective, from a flower's perspective. Those types of questions could revolutionize the way we view our own place within this beautiful Gaia. And what are the ethical consequences of whatever choices we're facing? Right? What are the consequences of choosing to trade water for an AI search? What are the ethical consequences of crafting you in a superhero costume on an app on your Instagram or TikTok for people not having water to drink because they've used that water to cool the data centers that are utilizing 10 times more energy for these artificial intelligence machines than a normal search would? What's the ethical fallout of that? Is that worth it? And then finally, how can you translate essence in a way that it can be received? Gemini is a master translator. And again, I think that we're probably going to see new ways of translating information, or even some divine ideals, or attempts to do so, for better or for worse, that could lead to some interesting insights. I would just say this from a balanced perspective. Sometimes the pursuit of a divine ideal leads to suffering, right? Sometimes sometimes change isn't always good. Well, let me backtrack on that. We can't avoid change. The world is changing whether we like it or not. But the hubris of trying to control the change can be what leads to the suffering of ourselves, others, etc. All right. Jennifer says, it's all about coming from love in all things, I believe. My idyllic Jupiter showing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is something that mystics, I think, agree upon quite a lot. Is love is the foundation for all of it, you know? But what does that mean, though? What does that mean? What does love mean? We can get really philosophical with this. All right. So let's move forward. We'll keep discussing Uranus and Gemini. I think that since it's such a long transit, 7 years or so, we're going to have plenty of time to let that unfold and to have it bring us the right questions to ask and the right ethical quandaries to try to unpack. I am a firm believer in taking your time with new things. You could call me a Luddite, you could call me slow, but I am someone who at least attempts to understand the repercussions of what that new thing could have, not only on my life, but on society's life. And I would also encourage everyone to maybe slow down a little bit. Think about whether what you are doing has collateral effects, not only in your own life, but on the lives of others. I was thinking think about the innovations we've had in the last couple decades with just our phones, for example. How much attention does that phone just suck out of you each day? And how magical of an instrument did it seem to be when you first got it? Like if you have like a fancy smartphone, like an iPhone or whatever. Don't get me wrong, it does some miracles. But there's fallout from that. There's a price to be paid. There is a liver that is going to be consumed, and your liver is your attention that is consumed every day as it's chained to the rock of your smartphone. Just something to think about. All right, we get to the full moon in Capricorn here. And here we see, this is on July 10th. So this is the last aspect we have in Cancer 2 before we move into Cancer 3. And here we have the moon in Capricorn. We'll do a live stream with this coming up in the weeks ahead. And we've got Jupiter still co-present with the sun. The moon being hosted by Saturn and Aries. So not only is the moon in its exile, but it's being hosted by a fallen Saturn. So this could be a little bit of a bumpy patch in the month of July. Let's see here. Mars is going to be trining the moon, separating. The moon's going to be separating from a trine with Mars. The sun and Saturn are going to be squared by whole sign. So Saturn is squaring off this full moon. The aspect isn't super tight, but it's by whole sign we're still going to be feeling the pinch and the pressure of that. The first aspect it makes, though, is a trine with Venus in Gemini. So at 6 degrees of Aquarius to 6 degrees of Gemini. So I think it could unfold positively. Oftentimes when we see an aspect with a benefic planet, it can unfold, and even if we have challenges at first, it can work out okay in the end. I think this is kind of the questions of, family, protecting the family, but also having to work within very difficult circumstances. So how do we protect each other even when our resources are limited, or when we're working within an oppressive system? Ani says, information technology is about to launch next level with Uranus and Gemini. Hold on. I just ordered Faraday cages. Ooh, yeah. Are those the ones that protect your phone from outside signals? Yeah, this is another thing. The scams are getting much, much more sophisticated. And people being able to break through. I think there's one computing, sort of like a doomsday scenario with computing, where if AI gets to the point, or quantum computing gets to the point where it's advanced enough, it can start to break through password protection much, much easier than normal. And if that happens, I can't remember the specific term for it, but it's sort of like a doomsday for computer folks. And we're hurtling towards that. And that just makes all of our information just laid bare for anyone who wants to exploit it. So yeah, little things like that, and preparing in that way, like preparing for, dual factor authentication, like Faraday cages, all of these things that can help protect us and our information. That is important moving forward. Okay, so that's our full moon in Capricorn. We'll go through this in more depth when we get to that live stream. But I think that the main themes with that is Mercury is going to be slowing down to station retrograde. Saturn is slowing down at this full moon to station retrograde shortly after. Jupiter is going to be emerging as the morning star. We'll unpack all of this, but all of this is going to be happening simultaneously with this full moon. Okay. And we're going to have to be working with the resources that are a little bit more harsh and a little bit more winter-like than summer-like, I guess you could say. All right, so let's do this. Let's take a little stretch break at the end of our Cancer 2 exploration. We're still got a couple more decans to go. Do me a huge favor. Please like the video if you haven't yet. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Welcome if you are. Thank you so much for hanging out today. Appreciate all of you. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, that can help out to know when things are going live, etc. If you want to make a donation to the cause today, you can make a little super thanks or a super chat, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com. That's always appreciated. But mostly I appreciate you being here today. Appreciate you contributing and your thoughts and ideas and your presence. All of that stuff is filling up my heart, and it all helps. Every little bit helps. Get yourself a snack. Get yourself a drink of water. Drink your tea if you got it. Okay, get my little sip of green tea here. Love that matcha green tea. That's what I should call it. Buy me a green tea. Buy me a matcha. Oh, Ani says, thanks, Spencer. It gave me some insight to chew on. Oh, appreciate it, friend. I think this is what we try to do here on this channel. I don't always have definitive answers, but I do like to try to provoke interesting questions. And what I think that does is that empowers all of you to reflect on what your answer is, rather than me saying, this is what this is going to mean, period, bold, capital letters. I'm going to say, hey, you know, what do you think this will, what do you think about this? Let's ask this question. Let's have this discussion, right? Oh, Ani, thank you so much for the super sticker. Appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here, friend. It means a lot to me, so thank you for your support today. Okay, let's keep going. What do you say? Let's keep on rolling. Before I do, just for those of you who are stopping in late, we got a Dignity and Devotion webinar starting tomorrow, Saturday, the 14th of June. We're going to be breaking down all things Jupiter. There's a link to that in the description of this video. You can also find previous webinars at the store on my website if you missed any of them. They're all like about 4 hours long. We've really packed a lot of, I think, information and value into them. So if you want to join us tomorrow live for that, as I'm recording this, you have the opportunity to do so. So would love it if any of you want something to do to maybe, I don't know if it's a distraction, but to do something positive during the Mars-Uranus square and the Jupiter-Saturn square. And I know that there's also other cool things going on this weekend, like there's a lot of like the No Kings protests that are going on all across America, and I think that is very worthwhile to do, but why not both? Jennifer says, the sun will be on my Mercury on the full moon. Lighten up something in a second. Sure, the money. I have to spend on a new softening system. Oh, well, that sucks. That could be expensive. I know how that's like. D, the Jupiter webinar is going to be at 1 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday the 14th, if you want to join us for that. I believe that will be 5 p.m. or 1700 hours British time, if I'm not mistaken. Saturday filming, yeah. There will be a recording of it too. If y'all can't make it in person, you can always check it out in the store after the fact as well. 6 p.m. D there. Okay. Oh yeah, that's right. 5 hours. 5 hours. Okay. I was close. $1,800, right? Okay. So Faraday cage, is that the thing that's like blocks the phone signals? If it just so I'm clear on that, Ani. Because yeah, she's saying that they found one at Home Depot. I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole, but been having some Home Depot experiences. For those of you who have been following along with As the Garden Goes, yeah, Ani says yes. Okay, we just we built the steel raised beds, and then they were so big. They were like 3 feet tall, 8 by 4 by 3 feet, and I was just like, this is too big, and I didn't really like the steel vibe, so we ended up selling one to our neighbors, and we went and bought cedar, which I know that like that's what I really wanted from the first place, and I was like, oh, but it was too expensive and whatever. We thought we had found the way to find cedar at a good price, but we ended up doing our math incorrectly. We only bought enough wood for 1 raised bed, and we thought we were buying 2, and we were like, wow, this is not a bad deal. And then we're like, oh man. But we got the wood home, we had already cut it, and measure twice, cut once, friends, is my advice for that. But we should have enough to make at least one nice raised bed this season. Oh my gosh, that was one last gift from Jupiter and Gemini that said, oh, I'm gonna make it difficult for you to bring this to completion. But so it goes, and the experience learned. I'm also learning how to use a circular saw, and I will say, watch your safety videos, because man, you don't want to lose a finger or a toe. Yes, Rachel. As the garden grows, these are the days of our lives. Okay, back to it. So let's start talking about Cancer 3. Cancer 3. Where is it? There we go. So we're going to go back to our slides. And here we see the 4 of Cups representing Cancer 3. And the sun is going to be moving through Cancer 3 from July 11th to July the 22nd. And here we see someone who has already achieved or had become maybe satiated by these 3 cups already in front of him, and he's refusing the 4th cup being offered by the hand coming out of a cloud, or the hand of the divine. He's sitting underneath this tree, and he says, I've had enough. I've satiated my material desires. Now I'm either bored or I don't want any more. The point of diminishing returns, right? So questions of surplus versus scarcity. Sometimes I see people who have prominent placements in this decan, myself included. I have Mercury in this decan, retrograde. Oftentimes there's questions of what to do if you have too much or too little. Like, I've gone through periods in my youth where I experienced great abundance with very generous grandparents, and then I had some experiences where we experienced great scarcity because of some of our family turmoil, and all these questions of what to do with surplus and scarcity, and the awareness of receiving can possibly take away from someone else's, I think, a Cancer 3 experience too. I experienced this really intensely, with just time. Time is a resource. And the time that I spent with one parent, it was taking away time from the other. And one parent would be sad if I was going one place, and you get this great awareness of somebody's gain is someone else's loss. And that can be a really intense Cancer 3 lesson. They call this decan the book, the Lord of Luxury and the Lord of Blended Pleasure. Austin Coppock calls it the overflowing cup, right? Sometimes we just have too much. We don't know what to do with it. We can see great philanthropy come through this decan. We have a daimon in this decan, Hecate, the goddess of the crossroads, who is a triple goddess who associated with the moon. This is a lunar decan. So she can bring things into being, but she can also take them away. So this kind of give and take. So divine discontent, apathy, jadedness, boredom, Hesed in Bria, which is a Jupiter Sephira. We'll talk about that more tomorrow in our webinar. Talk about Hesed. So emotional saturation. We're feeling saturated, too much of an element. This decan can lead to luxurious taste or feeling overfilled. The point of diminishing returns. One of the things with this decan, imagine that you've gotten all of your material, physical, bodily needs met. Think of you've had enough food, and if you eat even one more bite, you're going to feel sick, right? What do you do when you start to move forward into what is next? I have found with this decan, having Mercury here, when I feel these periods of I've had enough, I feel bored, I feel discontent, it's a moment right before a breakthrough. And it's a moment right before the transition into Leo, where we start, moving beyond the body and trying to start feeling, understanding meaning, and maybe even spirit meaning. What are we here for? Why are we here? We've gotten all our material needs met, and that's good. Don't get me wrong. When we don't have our material needs met, that can lead to all sorts of other problems, right? But when we have everything that we need, then what? What's next? What's our spiritual pursuit that we want to embrace? What's our authentic self when we have everything that we could possibly want physically? So where in your life are you feeling discontented? Do you need more, or have you had enough? And if you've had enough, how can you share the excess, your surplus, with those that don't have enough? So something that we really should ask really tough questions with as the wealth inequality becomes, and the wealth gap becomes greater in Western civilizations, is, do we really need, do the billionaires need more money? To them, it's really just a game at this point. They have everything that they could possibly want. I was considering this the other day. I was having this thought. I had this thought out loud. I was like, the president of the United States has probably all the money that he could ever want, but he chooses to eat at McDonald's. I was thinking about this after I was reflecting on watching Anthony Bourdain, and just the beauty of the richness and the abundance and the wealth of even these extremely poor communities, but they are so wealthy in family, community, and sharing what little they had with a stranger, right? And some of these folks that have more material resources than they even know what to do with, and yet they choose these nutritionally bankrupt experiences, spiritually and physically. A point of diminishing return if there ever was one. So questions of what is true wealth? What does it mean to be wealthy? Right? It goes beyond your physical needs and resources. And this Cancer 3 can help us ask that question. You can also ask yourself if this is a lull before the next breakthrough, right? Before you can reconnect with a passion. I think that Leo ignites a passion. You've had all your physical needs met. Now, how do I find a passion? And finally, just what comes next? What are we preparing for? Okay. And sometimes, how do we empty our cup? Let's say that you have too many emotions, too many feelings, right? Too many whatever. I'm experiencing this now in my home. I haven't had as much time as I would like because I've been involved in too many projects, whether it's professionally or personally, and now my house feels like it's getting cluttered up and it needs some attention. It's the overflowing cup, and what it needs is space. And I think what Cancer 3 can do is say, how can we create space? If you have too much, how can you empty that cup? How can you feel your feelings so that they're not spilling out in destructive ways? How can you clear some space so that you can see what is next in your life? I mean, this is what we should do in Cancer 3, is create space through either sharing our abundance or starting to say, how do we empty out our knowing so that we can ask the right questions? Sometimes there's axioms that talk about people visiting a spiritual master, and they come with, it's like, well, you come back when your cup is empty, right? Because if your cup is full, there's nothing that you can learn. There's nothing that you can receive. We've had some people on the channel lately that have come and said, well, I don't think there's anything I can learn. And it's like, well, then I don't have anything to offer you, right? They were like, I'm right all the time. Well, then I don't have anything to offer you. Your cup is full. You see? How do we empty that cup so that we can at least have the possibility of learning and receiving more information, more wisdom, whatever it is? Okay. So let's start looking at how this is going to unfold. Yeah, Jennifer says, I can relate to that with the sun at 28 degrees. It comes and goes. Taught me to save up for the hard times to a point that is, my idea of lack has changed. Yeah, right? I think as we learn what true wealth is, we can have all the material goods in the world, but if we are experiencing time poverty, if we're experiencing the poverty of loneliness, the poverty of health poverty, like ill health, all of those things can make us, unbalanced. And sometimes we're exchanging all of these quote unquote resources for one another. We exchange our time for material goods. We exchange our health for those material goods. Sometimes we exchange our health for social relationships. Sometimes we're over socializing, that can make us sick. So how do you create a balance between all these things? And you can even make a chart for this, Jennifer, or anybody. How fulfilled do you feel in your health area? How fulfilled do you feel in how much free time you have? How fulfilled do you feel in your social relationships? All of those things contribute to a well-balanced experience of wealth. Maybe you need material resources too. Those are all legitimate things to take stock of. But I do think in this country, America in particular, we glamorize the material forms of wealth and sometimes ignore and even shun those other forms of wealth, especially time, relationships, etc. I think we need to change that. So on the 13th, Saturn is going to station retrograde. So let's move the chart to reflect that. So here's Saturn now with the red number, stationing retrograde, going backwards, helping us to understand maybe and reflect on some of the changes that have happened, I think socially, I think in the way that we design the blueprints of our lives, Okay, design the. I like the way Charles Obert speaks towards designing the Saturn being the the architect, right? The blueprint that we're drawing upon, and then Jupiter being the, I guess you could say Jupiter is the begetter, the architect that actually draws from those plans and brings things into being. Here, the plans may be changing. We're reviewing the plans. We've had a lot of people trying to change the plans to meet their own personal desires. And what happens when those, people catch wind of that? Like, for example, in this, legislation that's trying to be passed in America right now, our own fucking senators don't even know what's in the bill. So maybe they should start fucking reading it so that they understand what they're signing off on. Maybe that's what Saturn in Aries, that's Saturn in Aries retrograde speaking, and it's speaking with anger, like, and intensity. And maybe when it stations retrograde, there will be a review of some of those things that maybe people have shirked a responsibility and need to go back and actually perform that responsibility. I mean, this also too is, it's going to start to see Saturn separating from its square from Jupiter. And eventually Saturn is going to retrograde back into Pisces. And it's going to retrograde into Pisces on September 1st. All right. As of the retrograde, it's going to be hosted by Mars and Virgo, and it's going to retrograde back into Pisces on September 1st and then station direct on November the 27th at 25 degrees of Pisces. It'll move back into Aries on February the 13th of 2026. And then it will perfect its conjunction with Neptune at 0 degrees of Aries on the 20th of 2026. So one of the things to think about with this retrograde is, especially if you are trying to do Jupiterian things, you are going to get some relief from Saturn in Aries from September the 1st all the way until February the 13th. So I think that that's a good time if you're somebody who does like elections, like not having Saturn in the overcoming square is a much more positive way of thinking of how to craft an election, rather than, again, we'll talk about this and walk you through it tomorrow if you sign up for the Jupiter webinar, but there's a really nice window there of elections where Saturn isn't going to be kind of messing it up. So something to consider. Rachel says, amen. Yes. to Congress people actually reading the bills that they're signing. Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? It's wild. It's wild to me that we have our hands in people that shirk their responsibilities so greatly. But that's, that's life, and we're going to have to adjust. And maybe adjusting looks like creating a whole new system. We'll see. I hope so. I'm kind of over this system, and I've been over it for most of my life. It's exploitive and destructive, and I think that human beings are capable of better. I think I still am holding that kernel of hope that I've seen it, because I've seen it. I've seen people who have good hearts and who craft conscientious communities and help one another through reciprocity. I've seen it in my own neighborhood. I've seen it even in people that I had vehemently disagreed with for a long period of time, of connecting with their shared humanity. I know it's possible. And I think it's just going to take just great awareness and kindness, but also healthy boundaries and innovation and resistance when it comes to people who are trying to oppress not only us, but people who are vulnerable. We're not even feeling, if we're not feeling it personally, somebody is right now. And if we truly believe in that Gaia principle, if someone else is being oppressed, it's, we are not different. We are of one earth. So on the 15th of July, Jupiter is going to emerge from under the beams of the sun. This is fun. I like this one. There we go. So this, I think, is a really important moment for for Jupiter in the Jupiter cycle. It's emerging at about 8 degrees of Cancer. And this is going to have an effect not only on your Cancer area of life, but this could reveal something about the Sagittarius topic in your life and the Pisces area of your life. Okay, those two topics in traditional astrology are connected via their host in Jupiter. So I think that this is the moment where you could start to visibly see some of the things that were start cooking behind the scenes when Jupiter was going through its cazimi phase earlier in the month, or later in June. Okay, so we have a Jupiter cazimi, I believe that's at the end of June. Okay, and we could start to see revealing the actual manifestation, or the beginning of the manifestation. Now, again, that comes with the caveat that Jupiter is going to be under the auspices of a malefic enclosure until August the 1st. So even though Jupiter is emerging as morning star, you might start to get some clarity about your beliefs, about liberation, about begetting something into being that is new. You may still have to wait a few weeks before the pressure of Mars and Saturn alleviate. I do think that whatever is being born with Jupiter and Cancer in the cazimi is going to be feeling the pressure of needing to either make an individual start, okay, or do something pioneering, or feeling the pressure of having to rely on your own, skills, etc. But also, you may have to learn some new skills with Mars in Virgo. You may have to learn how to manifest that. You may not have the knowledge yet to do what you are planning on doing. And I think that what the smart money would bet on for the second half of July, specifically in regards to the Jupiter emerging, learn the skills that you're going to need to really make that new start. Prepare for that time when Saturn is not in the overcoming square, beginning of September, where you really might have the freedom to move more forward than you do during the summer months. It's okay to be in process. Yes, it might not all come together right away, but you will learn the skills necessary to craft what you have been envisioning. All right. So then we have this last quarter moon at 25 degrees of Aries. We're going to move it forward to the last quarter on July the 17th. So this last quarter moons are sort of these existential crises, right? That challenge us to release something. And a last quarter moon in Aries squaring the Cancer sun. Remember, we've talked a lot about surplus versus scarcity, trying to figure out what to do if we have more than we need, or if we don't have what we need, how are we going to get that? And last quarter moons are always about releasing something. And I think where the moon is moving towards in the quarter moon, we have to be able to release whatever the moon is highlighting to be able to manifest the goal of the solar consciousness, because the sun is infusing light into the body that is the moon. So we're trying to achieve balance. We're trying to achieve emptying the cup. We're trying to achieve knowing what to do with our surpluses, or how to alleviate a scarcity. But we can do that through letting go of the Aries 3 quality. So what is that Aries 3 quality? Well, Aries can be associated with conflict, can be associated with individualism, wanting to dominate something or someone. It can be like doing it as a solo person rather than as a part of a team or as a family. Aries 3 speaks about trying to win over a hostile crowd through charm. So maybe we have to release some of our attempts to get everybody on board through charisma. Maybe we need to utilize our charisma to get people on board. It could be, I could see it both ways. But we may have to either strongly motivate those around us Or start saying, hey, you know what? Maybe we don't need to have a rah-rah speech. Maybe we just need to work quietly behind the scenes at the last quarter moon, right? That motivational speakers are associated with Aries 3 quite often. And at this last quarter moon, we might be like, I'm over the speeches. Let's just share and figure this out. Let's release our individual desires and say, how are we going to make this work for the most amount of people? I think that's what we could be experiencing here. I would say that this is also a good opportunity to release. Release is a good word for this period of time, because we're also seeing Mars coming into conjunction with the South Node in Virgo. So I think that this last quarter moon time period, I think it's a lot of it is about not being so attached to the method, not like saying, oh, I got to fight for my own way of doing something. You know, part of the lesson, I think, of the North Node in Pisces, South Node in Virgo is saying, how can you kind of surrender to the process? Like, you're almost forced to surrender to the process. You may think you have a plan, but maybe God's plan is better, or maybe the divine's plan is better. And how do you surrender to it rather than like trying to control it? I've learned this throughout this spring, trying to grow the garden and the infrastructure behind the garden. There's been a lot of like obstacles, and sometimes the obstacles created innovative solutions that I wouldn't have thought of without the obstacle, but I had to surrender to the process. So I think that's part of what we're seeing at this last quarter moon. This is also within the next day or so. We're going to see, so there's a couple things we'll unpack here at the same time. We're also going to see Mercury stationing retrograde. So at this last quarter moon, Mercury is slowing down to station retrograde in Leo. Mars is coming into conjunction with the South Node. You probably are going to have to let go of something, let go of a process, let go of an ideal as far as how it has to work. And I'll come back to my mantra that I always talk about with Virgo Pisces axes is, how can you accept that form is changeable and temporal, but how do you express the eternal essence through accepting the form could change? Now, I've already gone through this. I've had a vision of what I've wanted to see. Like, I was like, oh, I got these garden beds, these steel beds. Oh, we're gonna be able to grow so much food. And then it actually manifested. I was like, that's not what I want, or that's not what is gonna work. And I had to surrender to the process and make all sorts of changes. And we still are in process, and we may have to surrender even more. We've got, 40 plants and probably not space for those plants. We started a bunch of seeds this year. This is just a practical example. So how can you get rid of the excess around this period of time? How can you may also have to ask questions with Mercury retrograde in Leo 2 about your identity, your authentic identity. We talked about this earlier in the show, but your identity is, I see authenticity and identity like this. And this is coming from a Leo ascendant. It is the marriage of your internal experience, your internal sense of self, and your external expression. And the victory that we see in Leo 2 is the victory of being able to marry those two, to say, hey, I'm going to express who I really am on the inside without necessarily having to have the applause of that externally. Oftentimes we express ourselves in a way that is not true to our true inner self because we're trying to please someone else. And the victory of Leo is saying, I'm going to be me, and you can take it or you can leave it. Okay. And there's still a lot of Leo folks that are trying to prove that their inner self is worthy of love. But you're going about it all wrong if that's the way that you're trying to manifest that. The true way to find that peace, to find that victory, is not through the external validation. It's through self-validation. It's saying, I love and accept myself just as I am. And if that works for you, fine. If not, okay. We'll see you later. And it doesn't mean you have to be a dick about it. It just means that you're not going to be for everybody. But if you can look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, you know what? I like who I am. I like what I'm doing. I'm at peace with who I am. Mercury's going to have you asking these questions in this decan. It's going to say, who really are you? And do you need that validation? This is one thing that I've hopefully come a little bit, had some growth with in my life, is releasing the need for constant validation. And part of this is a trauma response. When you grow up with an absent parent, you're often trying to prove that you are worthy of love in the world. And I spent a lot of my early life with abandonment issues trying to prove that I was worthy of love. And as I've gotten older, I realized that you're not going to be able to please everyone, number one. You learn that as a musician. Funny story, I was reviewing I had my hard drive that I was trying to move some old files from one to another. I came across an old performance at the art fair in Ann Arbor, if any of you are familiar with that. And I was playing my original songs, and I was kind of in the vibing. It was 100 degrees out. I was sweaty and tired, but I was giving it my all. You know, I was really like just leaning into it. And some guy in the audience was like, play covers, play covers. He just kept shouting at me just to play covers in the middle of my original songs. And I was irritated. You could tell on my face that I was pissed, but I didn't like say, hey, fuck off. like fuck you. I'm playing what I want. I probably would, maybe I would today, but maybe not. Like, that's really not productive in that moment. But what I did do is like I started playing an improv song. I was like, here's a song called Covers. Like, it was basically me like trolling this guy in a sort of passive aggressive way, just making up a song on the spot that was like, ah, man, I wish I could go hide under the covers so I can get away from these harassing people. And then I said, here you go, there's an original song called Covers just for you. It's probably the only time it'll ever be played out in the world. And in that moment, was that guy happy that I played an original song trolling him? Probably not. He wanted to hear covers. But at the end of the day, he got what he asked for. Right? And you go home and you say, well, I was true to myself. I didn't acquiesce to what someone wanted me to do in that moment that wasn't what I was there to do. And these are the types of questions that you ask when you are true to yourself. And in that moment, I was trying to be true to my own creative vision. And I will say that there are some moments when you do want to play to the crowd a little bit. And I was not immune to that as a musician or as a professional astrologer or as a YouTuber or whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, sometimes you realize that you are not going to make everyone happy. You are not for everyone. And honestly, if you are for everyone, you might not be doing something very authentic. You may be trying to just like please too many people. That was the other thing I realized, is that if you really have almost an idiosyncratic vision, some people just aren't going to like it because it's not for them. And that's okay. That's the thing to consider. That's okay. Jennifer says, love the Ann Arbor Art Fair. Yeah, it's a good one. It's fun. It's always in the middle of July though. It's like, yeah, Adi's laughing. And it's always like it's either ridiculously hot, like 100 degrees, or it's like thunderstorming. So there's no in between. It's either like oppressively hot or like really raining. And when you're playing an outdoor gig, the weather is quite an element. And when you're doing when you are hired to do a show where you are coming in contact with a lot of people who aren't there specifically for you, like, you will have some interesting interactions. There's these shows where you are you, and people, your fans, come out and they'll pay for a ticket. But if you're just like literally playing on the street where there's like literally thousands of people just walking by, you're gonna have some people that you're not for, and you have to be you have to have a thick skin. And I think some of this Mercury retrograde is going to teach us how to have more of a thicker skin around who we are, right? Yeah, guys, give me the hearts. I love it. Ani says, I've been laughing for like 5 minutes, imagining you as a stage troll. I'll tell you what, I can be pretty quick on the draw with a song. And there have been many moments in my youth where, like, the thing that bothered me the most is, yeah, Jennifer says, yes, always on my birthday. So hot. Absolutely. You know, when I was younger, the Leo part of me was like, I'm on stage now and it's me time. You're going to pay attention to me no matter what. And that was part of the trauma response, right? That was part of the being ignored. That was was the small child who had been abandoned saying, God damn it, I'm worthy of love. How dare you abandon me? How dare you ignore me? Right? That's Leo 3 talking. So how dare you not pay attention to me? And eventually, when you don't have anything else to prove, you don't have to do that anymore. Like if someone was on their phone during one of my gigs, I would get really angry. I'd get really irritated. I would troll them in a song. I'd be like, oh, look at this lady in a pink shirt on the phone talking super loud during my song. You know, just going off on it. And they wouldn't realize it until later. And everybody was laughing about it. And then they finally realized, and then they'd either get pissed or they'd just go somewhere else. But eventually you realize that, hey, everyone else has lives that they're leading to. And just because you have a microphone and a guitar does not mean you have to be the center of everyone's universe, right? It's a tough lesson for Leo types to learn. I've had plenty of that, humbling. But at the end of the day, you know, when I was playing gigs, and if I were to ever go out and play gigs again, I play what I want. I play what makes me happy. I play what I feel emotionally connected to because that's an authentic emotion that I can connect with. When people are screaming at you for like whatever random cover, like free bird, they scream at you like that, and you don't have an emotional connection with that song. And this is a metaphor I'm speaking towards. Hear my metaphor. If people are screaming at you to be something that you are not, that you have no emotional connection with, it's not going to be good anyway. But if you do something that you love, if you be who you love, you have much more chance that people are going to connect with that authenticity than something else. You know, you've probably seen maybe a little bit of an evolution in what I say on this channel. You know, I have this kind of aspiration to be a peacemaker, and I think that is a true expression of who I am. People have said, oh, you're kind of like a Mr. Rogers type. I'll take it. I love Mr. Rogers. But I'm angry sometimes too. I'm upset with the way things are going down right now on some level. And I'm going to be angry sometimes. And that is an authentic expression. There's going to be some people in the chat that I don't agree with that are acting like jerks. Nobody today. But I may not have to agree with what they're saying in the moment. And that authentic expression is how you can really start to get to being able to, I think, if you have Leo placements or if you're experiencing the Mercury retrograde, that's how you're going to sleep at night, is understanding who and what you are without having to do harm, okay? If I'd go back to my however old self that was being a stage troll, I'd realize in that moment that it wasn't about me. They were living their own experience. It wasn't my job to troll them or to make them feel bad or to call them out. If I was truly being authentic in that moment, I would have been true to the song, my song, right? And for the most part, that's how it went down. You know, for the most part, that was how I did things. The only way I really got surly is when people were like, you know, interrupting me and like literally like trying to, you know, yell at me while I'm singing. That is disruptive. It's kind of this, let bygones be bygones type of thing. And this is what we have, the fine line that we have to walk as human beings in a society. It's are we allowed to be our authentic selves? And are we allowing other people to be their authentic self? Because if you are trying to change who other people are, well, then you become an emotional terrorist and you become the troll. You see what I'm saying? So that's the fine line that we're trying to walk with this. And sometimes there's not an easy answer to it. Ani says, I serenade people out my window. I can relate. It's awesome. I love that, Ani. I can just imagine you. Where are you at, Ani? Are you in Europe? Are you European? I'm trying to remember. Can't remember your placement, but I can imagine you hanging out of a second story villa somewhere in like a crowded town square and just like, oh, so mio, something like, I don't know, whatever. I just think it'd be good. So yeah. Oh, you're in Oregon. Okay, well, there you go. Like I can imagine you in Southern Oregon, like hanging out the window to all the flanneled hipsters. No, I'm just messing with you. It sounds like a fun place, actually. I have some friends that moved out there, and it seems like a really beautiful place. Yeah, the simple life. Okay, I'm just looking through the chat here. Steven says, this morning I started singing If I Were a Rich Man in the shower from Fiddler on the Roof. Well, there you go. That's a good one. Jennifer says, going from Cancer into Leo is hard. I don't like the attention inward to outward. The energies are so different. Yeah, I mean, as someone who lives squarely in both of those spaces, it can be difficult. Some days I love the attention. Other days I just want to go hide in my room, as Brian Wilson used to sing about. What a beautiful song that is. Go check it out if you haven't. In My Room. I think he struggled with this too. Just piggybacking off of that, Brian Wilson had Mars and Pluto in the first decan of Leo. And he really struggled with visibility and with, he got burnt out by touring, and he eventually retreated into his room for many years. So I think that we have to pace ourselves too. This is one of the things I've learned about music industry. You can fall victim to the machine. And I don't know if we're meant to just be living out of a suitcase. Some people can do it easier than others, but if it's not in your nature to do so, it can really lead to a lot of anxiety and challenges. And for me, that wasn't the life that I wanted. That wasn't what made me happy. Like I didn't want to live out of a suitcase all the time. I wanted to be home with my cats and my routines and my flowers and my plants and my partner and all of those things. So to each his own, though. Just as that was what worked for me, for some other people, that's the dream, right? Okay, so Mercury stationing retrograde, 15 Leo, sextiling Venus that day as well. So maybe some positive conversations. There could be some, ability to bring together other viewpoints, harmonious viewpoints, or harmonizing many different ways of viewing the world on that day. But it comes through asking questions and examining our own perspectives. Yeah, Jennifer says, I love that life. Absolutely. Or I love that song. Yeah, In My Room. It's a great one. All right, so on the 20th, that's when Mars is conjoining the South Node at 19 degrees of Virgo. The South Node, is in evolutionary astrology, the South Node is like, this is your past. This is what you're moving away from, or something of that nature. In traditional astrology, it's more of, this is a place of decrease. This is a severed body of a dragon that's processing something in the Jyotish system, right? So we're trying to release something. And I think with Mars conjoining the South Node here, we're releasing, first of all, fixation on the details, fixation on the process of how something gets done rather than the essence. I sometimes think that, well, I don't sometimes, I think that malefic planets on the South Node can actually be very positive because it can reduce some of the negative experiences with that. Now, that being said, what happens if a malefic planet is a ruler of one of your houses? Well, guess what? It is for all of us. So you could be experiencing a reduction in one of the topics associated with Mars, especially your Aries or your Scorpio house. Okay. So you could have to let go of something. I'm looking at the 20th and I'm thinking, okay, like just I'll give you an example. In my own chart, the Mars is the ruler of my 4th and my 9th house. And that's going to be in my 2nd. I'm thinking like, that sounds like a really great day to get rid of some clutter in my house, you know, like literally my 4th house. And maybe it will help me to see the world in a different way by releasing some of my possessions that I don't need anymore, maybe giving them away to someone who needs them. You know, that could be a manifestation. You know, if you're experiencing it in the 10th house, like maybe you have to let go of an attachment of how something is done in your workplace so that you can get to the finish line, get to the goal, get to the end goal. Okay. So try not to hang on too tightly to method when it comes to the Mars conjoining the South Node in Virgo too. And, you know, this is the desire to bring something into form is a Virgo 2 kind of experience. But as Pisces is teaching us, sometimes we have to surrender to forces that are greater than ourselves. Virgo likes to say, I can do it. I can get this done. I've got a method. Pisces says, surrender to a powerful force, a plan that you might not have. So I think that this is a shift in plans, a release of attachment to, you know, doing something a specific way. Tom says, I'm decluttering too. Yeah, I really have a strong desire to do that. I'm just trying to carve out some time to do so. I think, what is the date today? 2 weeks from now, we're going to take a break, you know, so I think we'll be back next week for the full moon in Capricorn. If I'm thinking of my timing right, but the week after that, I'm going to be on vacation, not having any clients, not doing a live stream. And I think that's going to be the space needed to start really kind of clearing out our physical space and our mind and our spirits to really just to hear our own voice of the divine, to see what is next, you know, sometimes the empty of the cup, right? Jennifer says, yes, I have Saturn conjoining the South Node, and it works that way. Yeah, you have to release things. That's the processing. And sometimes you'll have to deal with things from the past, and you'll have to deal with situations that you've inherited. But eventually, I think that we glamorize the North Node in Western evolutionary astrology and in Western civilization because it is the place of increase. And we have this warped perception that growth, unlimited, unchecked growth is the way to keep the system going. And that's not how nature works. Nature has periods of growth and then periods of recession and letting go and severing and compost. And that's how you create a healthy ecosystem. It's not through just growth. So bless those things that are leaving your life for the time that you had with them, and realize that it's creating fertility. That space is the space needed to create the future cycle of fertility. Tom says, as an artist with Neptune and Virgo, I'm trying to manifest my imagination. Well, there you go. Maybe you'll get something with, Tom says, when you sit still, you see things move. Ooh, I like that. Yeah. Maybe your Neptune will be activated, right, with this Mars South Node. Jennifer says, let go of change. Let the change of perspective come in when you let go. I mean, that's another thing. Releasing old beliefs and ideals. If you hang on too tightly to an idea, a belief, that can lead to a lot of rigidity, right? And to the death of situations. Okay. That is also coinciding the next day, the 21st, with Venus at the bending of the nodes. So here we're getting closer and closer to our Venus-Mars square, right? So that Venus-Mars square is building on towards the 23rd. And now it's going to start applying around this time period. So a couple things. So we've got Venus here's Venus, and it's at the bending of the nodes. So this is when a planet is squaring the nodes of the moon, and it's a turning point. So here we have Venus starting to move away from its kind of full moon phase related to the North Node in Pisces, and starting to move towards the South Node in Virgo. And it's doing that from the second decan of Gemini. To me, this is another point of release, right? This is where we say, hey, we've got all these ideas, we've got all these things, we've got all these beliefs, we've got all these directions we could go, but you're gonna have to start letting go of some of them so that you can manifest what you need to, right? So another really important moment of letting go and release with Venus at the bending of the nodes. So again, this is starting to move Venus significations towards the South Node, while simultaneously Mars is conjoining the South Node. And those two things are squaring. So as we build, I'll just preview this here. This is going to happen in Leo 1. But what we're building towards with the Venus-Mars square, okay, is we're building towards Venus being in the third decan of Gemini, where we have too many ideas. We just can't keep all the plates spinning. And Mars in the third decan of Virgo, where it says, what legacy do you want to pass on? So you're going to have to choose something that some legacy that you want to pass on. If you try to keep everything alive and you try to protect everything against the ravages of time, you'll end up not protecting anything. Okay, so definitely a moment of choice between the 21st and the 23rd. And I'll come back to that, but I wanted to show you that. Okay. Jennifer says, that's my birthday. How long is that transit in effect? Couple days. You know, it's going to move past a couple days after it's going to start separating from the South Node, probably by the 25th or so, you know, outside of that 3-degree conjunction. But you'll probably still feel it a little bit while Mars is in Virgo, and you won't truly feel the complete relief of that type of aspect until Mars is moving into Libra. But we'll talk about that. So let's take another stretch break. What do you say? Do me a huge favor. Like and subscribe. We've got one little leg to go. We're almost done. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Appreciate you. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Leave me a comment if you're participating today, or if you're participating in the future. If you are viewing this often in July and you're trying to figure out what to do around the middle of the month, just leave me comments. Let me know how things are going. I always love hearing how these things are playing out in real time for you. And I love making new friends. So let's be friends. Okay. Jennifer says, can a legacy be coming towards you also? I think potentially. But I think it's something to release, though. I think that there's a release happening with it. Maybe it's something that comes to you from the past. Maybe the legacy helps you to resolve an old situation, you know, like an inheritance or like an estate kind of thing, where you're having to let go of the relationship, but that helps enrich your material life. But you know, I was reflecting on this when I was listening to a Cook's Tour with Anthony Bourdain, and he was revisiting his childhood home in France, and his dad had just passed, and he was going there with his brother, and they were visiting all the restaurants and different places, and they were like, you know, this just doesn't feel the same. Like, I thought I would be in pursuit of like the perfect meal here in France. And he's like, what I really realized I was missing was my father and my relationship with him. And that was that moment really hit me. You know, like sometimes we try to revisit things to recreate a moment, a relationship, but doing even all the same things doesn't replace the experience with the people that we have and have that experience with. So Just something to meditate on with that. Okay. So now let's talk a little bit about Leo, and we'll bring up the decans of Leo. And we'll go a little quicker through this because, full disclosure, I'm starting to get hungry. This is the only time that I think I get, you know, a little, I get the hangries. You ever get hangry? It's the hungry, angry. Like, as a Cancer with a Taurus moon, I'm easily pacified. You just give me something really good to eat, and I'll be fine for a while. But if I'm hungry, man, and I need to eat, I get cranky. But we'll hold it together. We got to get through the rest of this July broadcast. So Leo 1 is associated with the 5 of Wands. And the 5 of Wands shows a competition, right? They call it the Lord of Strife in Book T in the Book of Thoth. Austin Coppock calls it the spotlight. So we're trying to figure out how to use our will and to utilize attention. Whether do we want attention or do we not want attention? It's a Saturn ruled decan. So the pressure to perform is something that we might feel in Leo 1. The love-hate relationship with visibility is part of Leo 1. So mock battles, athletic contests. Oftentimes the Olympics are always during this decan. They always start during this decan. You know, this is the card that always reminds me of the Olympics. It's not a real battle, but it's a competition, right? Pressure to strive. Gevura and Atziluth. It's the Kabbalistic tree of life, the Mars Gevura. Spotlights, stages, and role playing. Also masks and crafting a persona. So you think about, you know, the search for authenticity. We've talked about that a lot today. Sometimes when we're trying out new ways of being, it's a little awkward at first. We're trying to see which of these things really fits us. Who really are we? So sometimes we utilize a mask. I know as a person in the past who had really strong feelings about things and was very sensitive, I did a lot of masking in my worlds because I didn't want to upset people, or I was striving for love or to be accepted. I would mask a lot as a young person. Still have some of those tendencies. It never completely goes away, but I think it's less so, right? So how do you try on different personas? See what works, see what doesn't. How do you learn to master your appearances and direct your will and attention? Sometimes that can be uncomfortable, right? Where are you feeling the pressure to perform? We might feel the pressure of delivering when we get to Leo. What role are you being asked to play? Can you try on different ones? Which one feels comfortable? Is your outer persona in alignment with your inner truth? We've talked about that, the battle for authenticity. Is it time to step into the spotlight or seek refuge? Remember, we talked about Brian Wilson. He had Mars conjuncting Pluto in the 4th house in this decan. He felt the pressure of performing, and that brought up a lot of his maybe dark-sided tendencies of wanting to retreat from that spotlight. It was painful for him. You know, he had a lot of trepidation about being visible. He had an interesting chart too. He was a Taurus rising, Taurus 3 rising with Venus right on the ascendant. Okay. And he had Jupiter in Cancer. So he has the benefics right where they're at right now. It's interesting that he passed when the benefics were in the places that they are now. But he had a Gemini sun and a Virgo moon in a night chart. His Virgo moon was in the 5th house. So this extreme, probably, attention to detail, perfectionism, but that pressure that he felt to deliver on the perfect album was a little too much to handle, and understandably so. I understand that. I understand that as having someone who has a Virgo stellium and some Leo placements and Cancer placements. I get it. It can be overwhelming. I think I don't know if I've relayed this story, but I actually got kicked out of the recording studio during my recording of my album that I made, my EP, because the engineer, I was trying to find the perfect vocal take. We'd taken like 5 or 6 takes of the same vocal, and I wanted to piece it together. Like I wanted to I wanted every little imperfection to be sanded out of it. And that wasn't really the way that he worked. And I was just driving him crazy. He's like, you go home, I will figure this out and I'll send it to you. And if you like it, tell me you like it. If you don't, we'll keep on trying to find what you're looking for. but that's the type of energy that we might feel when we're chasing that perfection dream. What ambition has been ignited? We've talked about the transition from Cancer to Leo and the ignition of passion, right? We've had our material needs satiated. So now we're trying to find some kind of spiritual goal or mission or some kind of inner flame we're lighting. And then finally, how can you learn to direct and focus your will? One of the things a lot of Leo people are learning is that they can get involved, right? If they're learning a healthy Leo expression, and here's an example of this. I have the North Node in Leo on the ascendant. And sometimes I've had to learn in the past that it's okay for me to get involved, that my will can help change a situation rather than me just being the passive observer. Like I was, as a young person, I was painfully shy, like to the point where I didn't even want to go in. Like my mom made me go order at a fast food restaurant when I was like 9. And she's like, nope, you got to go do it. And I had a meltdown. I was like, I'm not going in there by myself. I don't want them to see me, And eventually she made me do it. She wouldn't take no for an answer. And it changed some things for me in that moment. It changed the, like, not altogether, but the fact that I remember it is important, right? That was a situation where I could exert my will and use my own will to enact some kind of change. And you have to be balanced with those things. You got to know when to get involved and when not to. But that can be a Leo kind of experience for sure. Yeah. Steven says, recovering people pleaser here. Yeah, it's a hard thing to heal from sometimes. We get trained to be people pleasers. Sometimes we become people pleasers because we weren't allowed not to be as young people. In addition to like some abandonment issues that I've worked through, Stephen, like I also had a police officer as a stepfather, and you kind of weren't really allowed to not be a people pleaser in that situation. And we have an okay relationship at this point, but there were moments, right? So sometimes it's a trauma response, but is what I'm saying. Jennifer says, my North Node is here in the 3rd house. And yes, my sister had competition. And I had competition when I was young. Yeah, believe it. Steven says, Sun, North Node, and Venus in the 4th house with Chiron and Mars in the 5th. Did not want to be visible when I was younger too. Yep, I get it. Totally get it. Lauren is here. What's up, Painted Turtle? Says, how's it going, Spencer? It's going. We're having a passionate Astrology of July. So it's good to see you. I hope everything's going well. Talking a little Uranus and Gemini today. We're talking Cancer and Leo, and having a good experience. Lauren says, after strengthening my solar plexus in ab workouts and lots of practice, I finally have the voice control I want singing. I understand that a perfectionist in that. Yeah, that was something that I took very seriously when I was a performer. I was trying to be able to control my voice and eat right and sleep right. Like I had very specific routines and warm-ups and things like that, because if you want to be able to express yourself, you want to have complete control over the instrument. You also don't want to hurt yourself. So yeah, I think those are also excellent ways to do that. Jennifer says, yes, it's the survival instinct, in reference to the people pleasing, right? Yeah, many of us were forced into that. Lauren says, I love your singing voice. Oh, thanks, friend. I've been singing a little bit lately. I did I recently recorded a cover of Carly Simon. What's it called? Can't remember the name. It's Coming Around Again. It's I know nothing stays the same, but if you're willing to play the game, it will be coming around again. Great tune. And I transposed it into my own little key. It was fun. It's really cathartic. Singing is cathartic. So with Leo placements, right? How can you utilize whatever spotlight it is? But it's not really about attention. It's about expression. I will say this in regards to Leo. I had a Scorpio friend who called me out when I was younger. He's a guitar teacher and really wise friend. I love talking with him. But he was watching me perform, and he didn't mince words. He had I think he has the moon in Sagittarius. He's like, Spence, I like what you're doing, but what you're doing, it seems like you're trying to impress people with your range and all the runs that you're doing. How can you express what you are trying to feel rather than impress them with your skill? And that moment, that was just like a big light bulb just went bing, and I was just like, oh my God, thank you. Like it was hard to hear at first, but then I like reflected. I was like, oh my God, that's so true. And it helped me to appreciate simplicity in melody and not have to over sing or overdo it, right? How can we express what we're feeling rather than impress? That is a great Leo, I think, meditation. Okay, let's go back to the chart. Here we have the sun ingressing into Leo on the 22nd of July, while Mercury is retrograding under the beams of the sun at 14 degrees of Leo. Okay, so it's going closer within the 15-degree arc of separation and becoming invisible in the night sky. So Mercury is at this point is the night star, or the evening star. That's the word that I was trying to find. The evening star, which means that we would normally be able to see Mercury become visible when the sun sets. But now, since it's under the beams, we won't be able to see. It's invisible. It's getting ready for its cazimi at the end of the month. So this is a time where we might really feel like we don't want to be visible, because we're already questioning our authentic self and how we present ourselves out into the world. And now I think we're going back into the lab or the woodshed to say, hey, who do we really want to be? I think it's okay to reevaluate your public personas every once in a while. Like sometimes we just get in rote mode. We get in a rut. We say that we've been doing this. This is how we identify for a period of time. And then sometimes that identity isn't a true expression of who we feel we are inside, because we're changing. Maybe we are changing. I've gone through this a couple of times. Like when I started to become a professional astrologer, I had a lot of existential crisis because I identified so deeply with being a teacher and a musician. And I didn't stop being those things, but it is different when you start to say, hey, this is what I'm going to do now, And eventually you just have to get more and more comfortable with it by testing what feels right. And this might be a time period where you're kind of doing some questioning behind the scenes of who and what is your authentic self and what you want your external expression to be. When we get to the 23rd, this is what we've been building towards with the Venus and Mars energy. Okay. So here is the sun making a sextile to Uranus. Maybe we have some innovative ideas about who and what we want to become. And then we also have Mars and Venus squaring off with one another. And we talked about that a little bit already, but long story short, Venus is in the Gemini decan that says, hey, one of the twins has to sacrifice some of his immortality if you want the other to live. So this is a time where we're probably being asked to sacrifice something to bring it into being, to preserve it, right? And the square with Mars says it's probably time to stop expanding and time to just start paring things down. You've got enough information. You probably need now to utilize those skills to make something real with it. And if you keep expanding and expanding with more and more elements, eventually the soup starts to go bad, right? I will say this. I watched the Anthony Bourdain episode I watched last night. He visited a sumo place in Tokyo. And they had this like really this great soup that they make for the sumos, and they just keep putting stuff in it, you know, which maybe that feels like Venus and Gemini. You've got dumplings, you've got bok choy, you've got noodles, you've got all this thing, and they just keep adding it over time to the end of the soup. But eventually, I'm sure that there's a point of diminishing returns where you just can't eat anymore. You know, maybe adding more things doesn't improve the flavor. I mean, maybe we could argue on that, but maybe it's just changing the flavor. But I think in life, when we start adding too many elements, that can really, you know, be counterproductive. I've experienced this with the morning shakes that I make. I for many years, over a decade, I would make like a protein shake in the morning, and it had like, you know, it had chocolate powder, like raw chocolate powder, blueberries, spinach, hemp seeds, bee pollen, maca powder, collagen, turmeric, pepper. I just kept adding things that seemed like, oh, I probably should need that. And eventually, very recently, my body was like, what are you doing? This isn't even making us feel good anymore. And I think it was too many calories in the morning. It was too much sugar. Like, it was just too much. And I just completely simplified it. I said, I'm not even going to do this anymore. I'm going to go back to a meal that worked very well for me when I was younger, that I felt really good after eating. And it's been really helping my energy levels. And it's less expensive. At some point, when you add too many things, you're just draining your resources for very little benefit. So I think this is the Venus square, Mars square energy in the 23rd is, where do you get to the point where you're just adding too many things in, and you have to start cutting some things out if you really want to do something with what you've been acquiring. Lauren says, Saturn may be pulling us Cancers into the public domain there in Aries, and then we may sneak back into our shells. Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it, Lauren. I think we need Cancers out in the world. We need some kindness. We need some sensitivity. We need some maternal protection. But, you know, as Cancers, we need to pace ourselves. Sometimes when we make ourselves vulnerable, then we need to go feel safe for a little while. You know, I'll do this very public thing today, and then I'll probably go, you know, not do anything publicly for a number of hours. Tomorrow I have another public thing. Sign up for the Jupiter in Dignity and Devotion webinar. But, you know, after this big period of activity, public activity, you know, Tanya and I have a 10-day break coming up in the end of June, and that'll be a good retreat. So I agree, Lauren. I think that it's you know, it's like breathing. Breathe in, you breathe out. You breathe in information, you breathe out some of the things that aren't working for you. You breathe in some public appearance, you breathe out by retreating back in your shell for a little bit. All right. Jennifer says, I do that with my morning tea. Add too many things, right? Oh, man. Steven's got some things going on this weekend, too, it sounds like. Nice. All right, so let's keep going. So we're going to, let's see. KWOW says, Cancer rising here, and sometimes it makes me feel vulnerability, whiplash, so to speak. Ooh, I love that. That's a good one, KWOW. Yeah, you put yourself out there, but then you're like, oh, shit, am I safe? I just said something. Oh, no, did I endanger myself? And then that's when we retreat a little bit. So I totally understand that feeling. I like that, vulnerability, whiplash. But, you know, that's part of the transition with gaining confidence, I think, is you put yourself out there, nothing terrible happens, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe it is safe to kind of just be myself. And you can really build on those experiences, too. Okay, so that's our Venus-Mars square, Sun sextile Uranus, maybe some new ideas about how to put yourself out there coming in the forefront, maybe utilizing new communication styles or technologies. On the 24th, so the 24th is kind of a big day. The period of time between the 23rd and the 25th is super active in July. Okay, so we've got the Sun trining Saturn, retrograde here, okay? It is also trining Neptune, and simultaneously, we're going to see the new moon in Leo, right, that day. So here's the new moon in Leo. We can kind of, we're going to do a live stream on that. Let's go back. That's the full moon. So there's the new moon at 2 degrees of Leo on July the 24th. while Saturn is trining the sun, and the sun is also trining Neptune, right? So this new moon trining that Saturn-Neptune conjunction there. Mercury is also under the beams, retrograde. So the other factor in this new moon, it's the Sun-Pluto opposition. It's a big elephant in the room. Now, I'll have to try to. I will preface what I'm about to say with, I've already been going for about 3 hours today. I'm starting to get hungry. And when I start to get hungry and I've been going too long, my ability to deliver the message in a graceful way sometimes can go by the wayside. So I don't want to get too far into this conversation right now, but Sun-Pluto opposition with a new moon igniting it, power struggles, right? Visibility versus homogenization into the collective, feeling pressure to perform, feeling the tension between a centralized force and power and a community that has been experiencing oppression from that force and power. Okay. Sun-Pluto oppositions in the past have often coincided with like some difficult experiences. I'm thinking back to, I think 2020, where there was a Sun-Pluto opposition, Cancer and Capricorn. And that was when we were seeing people being disappeared in Portland because they were protesting some of the events in that government, and people were kind of being abducted and taken away in unmarked vehicles. Not too much unlike what we're experiencing now, right? Part of that abduction part is really interesting in regards to Pluto, because Pluto, in myth, erupts from out from under the underworld and abducts Persephone in one version of the myth and takes her down and makes her the queen of the underworld. So I think that Ani says, tell us how you really feel. I feel like I've been doing that today as much as I can. I think I've already driven away or alienated anybody who is really on the side of the fascists in America. So I think that at least the people here, even if we don't completely agree on everything, there's maybe, I hope, a core of like trying to figure out solutions that work for everyone. Jennifer says, I like that, Turtle, being a Cancer sun, Gemini ascendant. Pan Turtle says, Cancer show us that feelings are abilities, the ability to grieve, the ability to hold joy. But helping new swimmers wade through the waters can be quite the task at times. Absolutely. Yeah, Ani, I'm trying to tell you how I really feel today. I think that this is going to be the beginning of a power struggle. And we've already had power struggles, but with a Sun-Pluto opposition, the seeds that have been planted for the centralized powers that are desiring to be king-like and to be unquestioned are going to run into the people not putting up with that. And as I'm recording this, we have sort of the seeds of this being planted. We have a Mars-Uranus square that is perfecting as I'm recording this. And if you are listening in the future, we haven't experienced the events of this weekend yet. As I'm recording this, we have two competing events that could have historical impact. The first is a military parade on the President of the United States' birthday that is ostensibly supposed to be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the military, but it's something where it's an unprecedented military show of power in America. Like, while simultaneously we have an organization of protests across the country for what an organization called No Kings. So No Kings sounds an awful lot like Pluto in Aquarius, whereas Leo is literally, the sign of the king, The sun was thought of as the king. And I think that this comes to and starts to come to a head, you know, at this Pluto sun opposition. Is people are kind of fed up with authoritarian, the seeds of authoritarianism being planted, at least in this country. I'm sure that this is happening in other countries as well. But there is a large portion of the population that's like, that's not what this country is about. It's specifically written into the Constitution that there are checks and balances. Like there's all sorts of noise coming out of the White House right now of like, well, we shouldn't be able to have the judicial and executive branch have too much power. Or I'm not even saying that right. It's the judicial and the congressional branch. What's the congressional branch? Legislative branch, sorry. And they're just interfering in the power of the executive branch. They want all the power to the executive branch, which is basically just Trump wanting to do whatever he wants without any pushback. So that's not how this country works. This whole country was formed, ideally, this is what the story is being told, to get out of the oppressive hand of the King of England. Now, we all know that there was all sorts of atrocities historically perpetuated in the name of that goal. 100% can't ignore that. But there's at least a seed of that idealism that Americans have been fed through whatever propaganda that they've had to learn through their schooling, that was what this country is about. And say what you will about it being built on the backs of slaves, which is horrific, and the inequality that still exists in this country. But I think that, like, we're being pushed to the very brink of trying to defend that ideal, right? Because we are seeing authoritarian power trying to exert itself and say, well, you don't even deserve due process. You know, if you don't belong here, and we're just gonna just scoop up our quota and try to send it off to a for-profit prison, right? It's literally numbers game to them at this point. It's just, that's what fascism is. If you don't understand what that word means, because that is something that gets thrown about a lot. But to me, the definition of fascism is when your government starts to be controlled by a corporate interest that is for profit, that is completely privatized. Okay? And all sorts of things get perpetuated in the name of that, right? Because you become, the people cease to become people, and they start to become numbers in a ledger, a profit number. Okay? And this is what the greatest lie that is being perpetuated right now is that the two political parties have to fight with each other. You know, it's really, I say this, and just please hear me for this. You've got two parties that are really like right of center globally, and they manufacture conflicts to distract from wealth extraction from oligarchs that are taking from the people. If Democrats and Republicans could just understand that simple concept, they'd be so powerful in uniting together against the corporate oligarch interest. It really is as simple as that. And I think that this aspect, the sun opposite Pluto, Leo and Aquarius, is one of the inflection points, and really starts to preview some of what Lauren was talking about, the Pluto out of bounds in the southern declination, which can speak towards revolutionary impulses, pushing back on power structures, power to the people type of experiences. Now, this is something else to think about, though, too, right? I think that this is you just have to be careful when you are trying to exert will. Because I think that the danger is that you become the very thing that you are trying to resist. And I'm not saying that that's what's happening right now, but I'm saying that that is a potential. So I'm a believer in peaceful protest and in peaceful resistance and how powerful that can be, right? And I know that some people have stronger feelings about method, but I think that we have to be careful that we don't become the oppressive force. I look at the French Revolution, for example. I think this was another Pluto South Node kind of experience. And this is also interesting because it brings up the Uranus and Gemini questions. When we get so fixated on an ideal that we're willing to create all of this human collateral damage in response to that, I mean, that's something that we really have to look at strongly in the mirror about. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, there are very righteous people that are trying to defend people that are experiencing extreme oppression and horrifying experiences. And sometimes, like, those things can be perpetuated, like by people that want to drive us further into chaos. So I'm very supportive of people who want to go out and protest authoritarianism. What I will say, having dealt with a narcissist in my life, sometimes what they want is chaos. And after taking the bait a number of times and realizing that that actually doesn't make it any better, you sometimes have to learn that you don't have to react to every provocation that the narcissist levies. And that is actually the way out of being under the thumb of them. Like, for example, what we're experiencing now, like the provocation in California. This regime wants nothing more than for that to descend into chaos, because then that allows them to create even more draconian laws to try to control people. So, I mean, I think that this is the thing, like, to start to consider with the Sun-Pluto opposition, is how do we resist authoritarianism without taking the bait that allows them to bring the hammer down even harder? And I don't have a great answer, but I do think it's through being organized, being calm and centered, but also being strong and having healthy boundaries and standing firm. I think that you can do that without adding to chaos. I would also say that there are soft resistances that can happen at this point too. Soft resistances are building community, like not allowing someone to make you descend into fear. Saying, you know what? You don't have control over my emotional state. You know, I'm going to go out and I'm going to create brother and sisterhood and community with my neighbors and with my community. I'm going to go plant some trees. I'm going to go grow a garden. I'm not going to be beholden to fear mongering. That's another kind of strength. That's another type of being able to see through the gaslighting and the bullshit to be able to create change, is through being so more of a mature presence that you don't take the bait of a child. Anyone who is a parent knows that if you start acting like your toddler who's acting out, you've already lost. You've lost the game, right? How many of you who are parents out there have, when you know you're getting pushed to your limit because the temper tantrum is happening, that you just have to go and sit down and get calm for a minute? You have to go and take a time out, and you have to say, little person, I got to go take a 10 deep, I got to go count to 10 or I'm going to lose my mind. And you do. And you go out and you calm yourself down and you come back and you're like, all right, this is how it's going to go. Like, because you're trying to model that behavior. You're trying to model what you want them to learn, how to experience, how to be in control of themselves. How do we model that? How do we model the kindness and diversity and equality and caring that we want to see while also protecting the vulnerable? I think this is a really important meditation for this new moon in Leo that's opposing Pluto in Aquarius. We'll talk about it more. There's going to be more events that unfold as we go forward. Even as I'm recording this, there will be events that are unfolding that will give us more information about what needs to happen next. But I do think that this one has a real intense signature of the centralized power versus the will of the people, and that those two things coming into conflict. Lauren says, I've seen so many beautiful photos of the people in LA and around the country and their spiritual strength, but of course the flaming cars are the ones all over the place. There's astrological, there's a new thought coming from Lauren. Yeah, just let me comment on just that part, Lauren. I've seen posts from friends in Los Angeles that said they're just showing the same 10 photographs over and over and over again. Most of Los Angeles is they're peacefully protesting this. It's not descending into chaos. And that's part of the gaslighting, that the bait that you shouldn't take, right? So Lauren says there's astrological significance to the LA riots of the 90s for a reason. Exactly. So that's another thing that I would say, as someone who has really tried to cultivate centeredness, a peaceful experience. Try not to let yourself be provoked into acting like the thing that you are trying to resist against. That to me is important. Now, that being said, if someone's trying to like kidnap your neighbor, like sometimes you have to do what you have to do. You know, I understand that perspective too. Lauren says those flaming cars are more energetic resonance to that time period and a healthier way to view them. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. Ani says, going back a little bit, says maybe the king versus the shadowy people who appointed and own him. Interesting. That's another great way to look at that, Ani. Yeah. I like where your head's at, because 47 president is a figurehead for something that is much more under the surface, for the billionaire oligarch class that is, you know, trying to basically bribe him and play on his ego to do their bidding. So that could be where some of this starts to come out as well. There, you know, I think Trump, he likes attention, and he likes to you know, he falls victim to all of those, like Leo, like, oh, I need to be appreciated type of things. He responds to flattery, and he responds negatively to the opposite of that. But you've got some other people in this administration that are like straight up fucking evil. Like that Stephen Miller dude is a straight up evil guy. Like he's like literally like creating ledgers to try to get numbers to send to the for-profit prisons. It's bad. And so those types of people behind the scenes are the ones we really have to root out. You know, Trump's just a figurehead for those types of folks. Okay. So that is our new moon in Leo. We'll talk about this a little more as we get closer to it. But personally, for this experience, think about your own visibility, your own pressure to be your authentic self versus how that might make you feel in relationship to the collective and the challenges that we experience through the collective. Those are something to think about at this new moon in Leo. Is you may be feeling some pressure to become more visible, to speak out, and that might feel scary. I know for me, in a lot of the past few years, I've hesitated to speak out too intensely, because some of it is a preservation tactic. I think I want to see how all things. I want to get more information sometimes before I make bold declarative statements. I'm kind of an observer first. I want to see how some of these things are playing out, and I don't know if we have that luxury anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I think we should always kind of get ourselves centered beforehand. But it's a really interesting time that we're living in. And I think that everyone will have a role to play as far as how they are going to choose to be when we are seeing these types of changes happening in our societies. All right, so the Sun-Pluto opposition is going to perfect on the 25th. All right, so this is when we see the exact opposition on the 25th, earlier in the day. Okay, so that's going to unfold as the seed is planted. And then we just have two more aspects. Okay, we have Venus moving into Cancer on the 30th. So this might help, I don't know, feel a little bit less of the ambiguity that we're feeling. Feel a little bit of the, like our heads are spinning, and maybe have our more of an attraction towards an emotional expression. There's a really interesting Venus-Jupiter conjunction coming up in August at 14 degrees of Cancer, which is the degree of exaltation of Cancer. So, or of Jupiter, excuse me, degree of exaltation of Jupiter. So we're building towards that, and that could be a really positive moment potentially. We then finish the month with a Mercury retrograde cazimi, an inferior conjunction of the Sun and Mercury coming together here at, let's see. I'm past it already, sorry. I went past it. It's at about 9 degrees of Leo. So a new seed being planted for mercurial things in your life about what role do you want to play? What role, how do you want to be seen? How do you want to not be seen? How are you going to utilize your spotlight and your visibility to contribute to the collective good and to be a more authentic expression of who and what you are? So a powerful moment for a renewal of Mercury in the heart of the Sun. All right, friends. That's what we've got. Let's see here. We've got a couple more things. We've got an animal and a hexagram from the I-Ching. Just a preview of August. We're going to have Venus at the very beginning of the month squaring Neptune and Saturn. So keep your eyes out for that, from Cancer to Aries. Mars is going to move into Libra in August and oppose Saturn and Neptune. So that's another inflection point. And then the really nice aspect for August is the Venus-Jupiter conjunction at 14 degrees of Cancer. All right, so our hexagram for this month ahead is number 25, and it translates to innocence. And it's changing to hexagram 16, which translates to enthusiasm. So innocence also can be thought of not just as like a childlike innocence, but in this case, they also translate it as without expectations, without guile, acting naturally, being spontaneous, the unexpected. So this to me sort of relates to Mars in Virgo conjoining the South Node. When we come at something with innocence or without expectations or guile, we're not dictating how something is going to play out. We're opening ourselves up to be guided. And I think that this is what's asking us to do. It says, it is beneficial to persevere. If one is not what one should be, he meets with calamity, and it is not beneficial for him to undertake anything. In the Book of Changes, innocence does not carry the Christian connotation of being without sin. Rather, the innocent means to be genuine, sincere, and unaffected, without guile or deceit. For similar reasons, innocence does not mean being naive or unaware of one's surroundings. A wild animal acts naturally and instinctively, but its senses are often finely attuned to its environment. To act innocently means to act spontaneously and naturally, without ulterior motives. However, human innocence means more than this, because aggressive, selfish, and depraved behavior can also be spontaneous. Innocence has a necessary moral dimension. It means doing the right thing for its own sake without thought of reward. An innocent person is naturally drawn to what is good and right and moves in this direction instinctively and without ceremony or calculation, without manipulation or deception. There's 3 changing lines, so let's skip ahead to that. The first changing line at the bottom says, innocence going forward brings good fortune. Jack Balkin says, innocence means responding to the inherent goodness within your nature. Follow your heart. If you are truly sincere and act with integrity, whatever move you make will be correct. So trust your heart, your intuition, if you're coming from kindness and integrity. At the 5th place, it says, innocence falls ill. Use no medicine. There will be rejoicing. He goes on to say an unexpected difficulty arises. Remember, we have Jupiter in malefic enclosure for the whole month, okay? Before rushing off to take active measures to solve it, consider whether external remedies are really necessary. It may be that the best strategy is to exercise patience. Let nature take its course. Things will get better on their own without your intervention. If you're confused about what to do, stop worrying about the problem for a while. The solution will occur to you in due course when you are ready to receive it. The more general lesson is that when faced with unexpected misfortune from without, one should imitate nature. Nature is infinitely patient and yet infinitely resourceful. It adjusts to change and responds to it naturally and simply. It accepts everything and eventually transforms it. In the same way, one should adapt spontaneously to the unexpected. Maintain an open attitude to the world and have faith that things will better themselves. Okay. And then finally, the top line says, innocent action brings troubles. Nothing is beneficial. Jack Balkin says, when the time for action is past, do not persist in trying to impose order and direction on events. This is even so if your motives are pure. A wise person understands that the secret of progress is knowing when not to push forward. At such a time, even innocent and spontaneous action will cause troubles. There is no more than you can do. There's no more that you can do at the present. Instead, you must wait patiently for conditions to change on their own. I may have said at the beginning of this, if you want to weather like a malefic enclosure of a planet like Jupiter, sometimes what you do is for waiting for the conditions to change. Doesn't mean there's nothing you can do. And the next hexagram talks about this. Translates to enthusiasm, stirring up, inspiring, broadcasting, undertaking, preparing for, providing for, planning ahead, enjoyment, delight. Okay. It says this hexagram has 2 meanings. On one hand, it means taking and making preparations for future action. On the other hand, it means stirring up enthusiasm and delight in oneself and other people. Taken together, the message is that if you make proper arrangements early on and provide for things in advance, you can feel free to relax and enjoy the fruits of your labors later without concern or guilt. You may justifiably take delight in what you have set in place and set in motion. Conversely, if you're trapped in inertia, indolence, and deluded satisfaction, you cannot make plans for the future. Take precautions and to work for the future. To take precautions and to work for the future, a person needs to be stimulated and motivated. This is why preparation is the flip side of enthusiasm. So if you can't do anything in the moment, if you can't do anything, you can prepare for future action. You can drum up the enthusiasm. You can work behind the scenes to start working towards the things that you eventually will be able to take action towards. Now, the animal I got for you is interesting. Now, trigger alert. It's an insect. So if you don't like creepy crawly things, we've got the centipede. So here is the centipede. Look at this guy. Look at him. He's kind of cute. So the centipede is interesting. I'm going to read to you from Melissa Alvarez's Animal Frequency. It says the centipede, and this kind of makes me think about Uranus and Gemini on some level. The centipede symbolizes movement. With its abundance of legs, it can move quickly and indicate forward motion in your life and the ability to do many things at once. As a centipede matures into an adult, it grows more legs as needed. This means that you are well equipped to handle new things by growing and adjusting to change. Centipede lives in damp, moist environments. You can find it underneath rocks, in decomposing leaves, and under logs. Some even live in the dark place in a house. Centipede grooms itself after eating and will clean each leg in a methodical order. Its bite is poisonous and it doesn't like to be handled. Centipede means taking care in what you say and the manner in which you say it to avoid misinterpretation. Its antenna symbolizes a combination or a connection to all things intuitive. When centipede meets a mate, the two antennas touch and seem to have an intuitive connection. The appearance of centipede means that you're likely to meet someone in the near future with whom you have a close psychic or past life connection. Centipede means that you'll come into your own and achieve success later in life rather than earlier. Safety and security might be important to you, and if centipede shows up, it means to check your safety measures and make sure everything is okay. Excuse me. For instance, check the batteries in your smoke detector. Be more vigilant about locking your doors, and be more aware of your surroundings. Carry pepper spray if you're walking alone. So the vigilance that we might need to have as the world changes is important. Centipede helps you when you want to have more coordination. For example, if you're learning to dance, if you're feeling disorganized, out of sorts, or at odds with yourself, Centipede will help you feel more grounded and help you find balance and harmony within. Centipede warns to get out of the spotlight and retreat when you're to where you're most comfortable. Sounds like that Leo-Pluto opposition on some level, and maybe even the Cancerian tendency to retreat. You may need this time to reevaluate and recharge, to plan and to create. Once you have done these things, you can reemerge with a new message and greater goals. Centipede is believed to ward off bad luck and negativity, and many people will carry them in their pockets for this reason. If you'd like to do this but don't want to carry a real centipede, you can use a toy one if you spiritually cleanse it and give it a specific purpose, such as good luck, more energy, healing, quickness, or making more friends. Well, there you go. So check all your safety measures. Try to be coordinated, and then take some time to retreat. And maybe we'll emerge with better ideas of how to create and align with nature, with reciprocity and generosity. Maybe it will help us to just learn who we are allowed, not who we are allowed to be, I guess you could say, but who we really are. Like, who we allow ourselves to be, right? How we can come into a more authentic expression. And a more authentic expression maybe requires different social agreements. I would say one of the things that I experience quite a bit as a 12th house sun, Cancer, Leo rising, I feel sometimes like, and you know this, I don't really agree with like the exploitive capitalistic system. And the things that we are forced to do to craft attention and to create content and the grind that goes into it, I don't resonate with it. And I try my best to work within the system as much as I can to maintain my responsibilities. But maybe the real question is not how do we grind in a system that we don't agree with, but how do we create one that is more in alignment with what it means to be human rather than what it means to exploit humans and the earth and the trees, etc. And maybe that takes some time away from it a little bit. Maybe it takes a time out. Maybe it takes some rest to be able to see a better way, a better organization, a better way to move through our worlds with these millions of legs that this centipede has, right? And it's going to take maybe quieting some of the noise, especially with Uranus coming into Gemini. I think if you think that the powers that be, the Gemini sun leadership is going to calm down, well, Uranus and coming into that sign is probably not going to do that. So you are going to have to be the one that calms yourself down and filters out the noise. And I think that this animal can help us with that. So that's what I've got for you today. Just going to check in one more time with the chat. Let's see. So we've got some more. Let's see. Painted Turtle is making some more comments about the flaming cars are more an energetic resonance to the time period of the LA riots in the 90s, and that's a healthier way to view them. Just wanted to add that, of course, vandalism to vehicles is wrong, but connecting visual references to the news and its cyclical nature can help us digest the information and not look away. Its heaviness or scariness. Yeah, I agree. I think that images are really powerful. But we have to be balanced in the way that we're taking in that information. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but in the interest of time, in the interest of my blood sugar, I'll have to kind of keep unfolding with it. You know, I think what I can say about that, Lauren, is I believe in equality. I believe in diversity. I believe in peace. I believe in the ability for humanity to manifest its higher, kinder, reciprocal nature. And I hope that we can continue to build towards that and provide contrast to the when we see the opposite of that in the world. Steven says, I am itchy looking at this centipede. Yeah, well, there you go. All right, friends, that's what I've got for you. Have a wonderful end of June. Have a wonderful July. Try to maintain your peace and centeredness so that you are able to respond to the challenges that life presents in a clear, centered, and grounded way, and a strong way. Clear, centered, and grounded and calm does not mean weak. Sometimes it takes enormous mental and emotional discipline and spiritual discipline to maintain your center and your cool in the face of crisis. So I hope and I wish that for all of you, not crisis, but the ability to maintain your calm. And it starts with kindness. It starts with reciprocity. It starts with just, it starts with self-care too. You know, try to maintain your nervous system through all of this. And I think you'll be much stronger for it when you're called upon into whatever duty that life is facing you. All right, friends, that's what I've got for you. Take care. Thank you so much for being here and all the nice comments. I hope that you're all having a great weekend, a great July. Be kind to yourself, be kind to one another, and we'll get through this together, I hope. Take care, friends. Peace.